Here's a secret the most resilient people throughout history have known. Your greatest power doesn't come from avoiding hardship, but from mastering how you respond to it. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That's the essence of Stoicism, not a philosophy of passive endurance, but a toolkit for unshakable resilience. Imagine facing life's chaos with the calm of a Roman emperor, the clarity of a philosopher, and the grit of a warrior. That's what happens when you apply these ancient principles to modern life. Think about the last time you felt overwhelmed. Maybe it was a crushing setback at work, a personal loss, or just the daily grind wearing you down. Now picture a version of yourself who meets those moments with unbreakable focus, turning obstacles into opportunities. That's not just fantasy, it's what happens when you train your mind the way Stoics have for centuries. This video is your guide to 46 battle-tested strategies straight from Stoic philosophy, distilled into practical steps you can use today. We'll break them into themes, mindset shifts to reframe challenges, tactics to thrive in adversity, and daily habits to build unshakable discipline. But this isn't just about theory, it's about transformation. Imagine looking back a year from now at a version of yourself who no longer fears chaos but commands it, who doesn't just survive life's storms but learns to sail by them. The Stoics didn't just preach resilience, they lived it, from Seneca facing exile to Epictetus rising from slavery. Their wisdom isn't locked in dusty scrolls, it's a living system for anyone willing to wield it. So if you're ready to fortify your resolve, to meet pressure with poise and chaos with calm, you're in the right place. Let's begin. The first and most powerful Stoic strategy begins with a simple but profound truth. Some things are within your control and some are not. Epictetus put it perfectly when he said, "Some things are up to us and some are not." That's the dichotomy of control, the foundation of Stoic resilience. Think of it like this: you can't control whether a storm rolls in, but you can control how you prepare for it. You can't control how others behave, but you can control how you respond. This mental shift isn't about giving up on external circumstances, it's about reclaiming your power where it truly matters. Take a work crisis, for example. Maybe a project falls apart at the last minute, a client cancels, or a coworker lets you down. The natural reaction is panic, frustration, maybe even anger. But the Stoic approach asks a different question: what here can I actually influence? The timeline, the client's decision, the coworker's reliability, those might be outside your hands, but your preparation, your adaptability, your attitude, those are yours to command. By separating the uncontrollable from the controllable, you free up mental energy for action instead of worry. Try this exercise right now. Grab a sheet of paper and draw 2 columns. Label one controllable and the other uncontrollable. Think of a challenge you're facing and sort every aspect into those 2 categories. What you'll notice is that most of your stress comes from focusing on the wrong column. The Stoics knew this secret 2,000 years ago. Real strength doesn't come from trying to bend the world to your will, but from directing your efforts where they can actually make a difference. When you train yourself to see this distinction clearly, chaos loses its grip on you. You stop wasting energy on resistance and start investing it in progress. Now let's explore one of the most powerful weapons in the Stoic arsenal, a technique called Premeditatio Malorum, or the premeditation of evils. Seneca called it rehearsing adversity in advance, and here's why it works. When you consciously envision the worst that could happen, you strip fear of its greatest weapon, surprise. The Stoics weren't pessimists, they were strategists. By mentally walking through potential disasters before they occur, you immunize yourself against panic when life inevitably throws curveballs. Picture this: you've spent months preparing for a major presentation, and as you step into the meeting room, the projector fails. No slides, no backup plan, just silence and expectant faces. Most people would freeze or spiral into frustration, but if you've practiced Premeditatio Malorum, you've already visualized this scenario. You've rehearsed speaking without visuals, pivoting to a discussion, even handling awkward questions. The setback doesn't cripple you, it becomes another moment to demonstrate resilience. This is how Stoics turn anxiety into advantage, by befriending uncertainty before it ambushes you. Try this exercise tonight. Take 5 minutes to write down one challenge you've been avoiding. Maybe it's a difficult conversation, a financial worry, or a professional risk. Now imagine the absolute worst-case outcome, not to dwell on it, but to interrogate it. Would it really destroy you, or would you find a way forward, as humans always have? Next, outline a Stoic response. What virtues could you call upon? How might this hardship actually strengthen you? This isn't about expecting doom. It's about realizing you're far more capable than your fears suggest. The genius of this practice lies in its paradox. By regularly facing what scares us in our minds, we rarely need to face it in reality with the same intensity. As Seneca wrote, the man who has anticipated the coming of troubles takes away their power when they arrive. So ask yourself today, what storm are you refusing to gaze at directly? Because once you name it and walk through it mentally, you'll find what Stoics discovered centuries ago, that most monsters lose their fangs under the steady light of preparation. Friedrich Nietzsche once gave us a phrase that perfectly captures the Stoic spirit: Amor Fati, the love of fate. It's more than just accepting what happens, it's embracing every twist, every obstacle, as if you'd chosen it yourself. Marcus Aurelius put it another way: the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Think about that for a moment. The very things that seem to block your path can become stepping stones if you shift your perspective. History shows this principle in action again and again. When the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius faced betrayal, war, and plague, he didn't crumble. He wrote Meditations, turning personal struggle into timeless wisdom. When the philosopher Musonius Rufus was exiled to a barren island, he didn't lament his fate. He started a school, transforming his punishment into a platform for teaching. These weren't superhuman feats, they were conscious choices to see adversity as raw material for growth. Here's the challenge most of us face: we resist hardship instinctively. A job loss feels like a disaster, a rejection like a personal failure. But what if you trained yourself to ask, as the Stoics did, how could this actually serve me? Maybe that lost job pushes you toward a better fitting career. Maybe that rejection spares you from a path that wasn't right for you. Amor Fati isn't about pretending pain doesn't exist. It's about trusting that even the bitterest moments can bear fruit if you have the eyes to see it. Try this reframe today. Think of one recent setback, big or small. Maybe a plan fell through or someone let you down. Now play out this question: what hidden advantage might this situation offer? Could it be freeing up time for something better, teaching you a lesson you needed to learn? Strengthening a skill like patience or creativity, the obstacle itself doesn't change, but your relationship to it transforms entirely. That's the alchemy of Amor Fati, turning leaden circumstances into golden opportunities simply by shifting how you hold them. Nietzsche called this mindset the formula for human greatness. Not because life gets easier, but because you become harder to break. When you stop fighting reality and start working with it, you unlock a profound truth: the universe isn't against you, it's shaping you. Every setback is a chisel, every disappointment a teacher. The Stoics didn't just endure fate, they fell in love with its rough contours, knowing that within every challenge lies the seed of an equal or greater benefit, if only you have the courage to look for it. Marcus Aurelius had a secret weapon against petty frustrations, a mental exercise so powerful it could shrink empires to specks and turn personal dramas into dust. He called it the view from above, and here's how it works. When life feels overwhelming, zoom out, weigh out, Picture yourself rising above your city, your country, until the entire planet hangs before you like a blue marble in space. From that vantage point, how significant is that rude email, that missed opportunity, that social slight? Suddenly, what felt like a crisis becomes a barely visible blip in the grand sweep of time. This isn't about dismissing your struggles, it's about putting them in proper perspective. Imagine two parallel scenes. In one, you're gripping your phone, heart pounding over a heated text thread. In the other, you're an astronaut floating above Earth, watching storms swirl and continents turn in silence. Which version of you sees the truth more clearly? The Stoics understood that our pain often comes from standing too close to the canvas, mistaking brushstrokes for the entire painting. Here's how to apply this today. Take any current worry and ask two questions. First, how will this matter in 5 years? That deadline that feels life or death now, will it even cross your mind half a decade from now? Second, what would this look like if I saw it from space? That coworker who gets under your skin would vanish at that distance. The meeting that went poorly would be lost in the noise of 8 billion lives unfolding simultaneously. This exercise isn't about minimizing your experience. It's about expanding your vision to see it in proportion. Consider the Roman baths Aurelius frequented, places where people argued over the best seat, schemed for social status, obsessed over trivial slights. 2,000 years later, we don't remember those grievances. We remember the philosophy born from reflecting on them. That's the irony. The view from above reveals the things we clutch tightly today often leave no mark, while the wisdom we gain from loosening our grip echoes through centuries. Try this tonight. Step outside and look at the stars, not casually, but really look. Our ancestors navigated by those lights. Empires rose and fell under them. Whatever's weighing on you right now exists in that same vastness under those same stars. Does the problem shrink or do you expand? That's the magic of cosmic perspective. It doesn't change your circumstances, but it transforms how you hold them. As Marcus wrote in Meditations, keep always before you how swiftly all things vanish. Not to depress you, but to free you, to remind you that most storms aren't worth weathering with anything less than grace. There's a reason some of the most profound Stoic wisdom comes to us not from grand speeches but from personal journals, because the act of writing sharpens thinking like nothing else. Seneca's letters to Lucilius and Marcus Aurelius' Meditations weren't meant for publication. They were private exercises in self-examination. Think of them as ancient versions of a lab notebook, a place to dissect failures, celebrate small wins, and refine philosophy through daily practice. Tonight, before you close your eyes, ask yourself this. If your thoughts from today were preserved for centuries like those of the Stoics, what would they reveal about how you move through the world? Journaling the Stoic way isn't about venting emotions or listing tasks, it's strategic self-auditing. Picture a surgeon reviewing their operations to improve technique, or an athlete studying game footage. That's the spirit of Seneca's nightly ritual. When the light has been removed and my wife has fallen silent, I examine my entire day. He wasn't just recalling events, he was interrogating them. Where did fear distort his judgment? When did pride masquerade as principle? This kind of reflection turns ordinary days into masterclasses in self-mastery. Here's how to start your own practice with 3 prompts borrowed from the Stoics. First, where did I act in alignment with my values today? Maybe you paused before reacting angrily in traffic, or chose integrity over convenience at work. Second, where did externals disturb my peace? That meeting that left you fuming, what if you'd seen it as neither good nor bad, but simply as something that happened? Third, and this is Marcus Aurelius' favorite, what could I do better tomorrow? Not self-flagellation, but calm course correction. Try this experiment. Commit to 3 evenings of Stoic journaling. No fancy notebook required, even a phone note will do. Set a timer for 7 minutes, the length of a cold shower. Another Stoic exercise. Cover those 3 questions, then add one more. What am I taking for granted that I could lose tomorrow? The health you complained about this morning. The job that stressed you today. This isn't pessimism, it's wakefulness. Seneca wrote, every night before sleep we should say to ourselves, I have lived, I have run the race that fortune set me. Your journal is where you measure that race not by distance covered but by character forged. The magic of this practice reveals itself over time. At first, you'll notice patterns, how often minor inconveniences hijack your mood or how quickly you label setbacks as catastrophes. But soon, something shifts. You catch yourself mid-reaction thinking, this will make an interesting journal entry tonight, and suddenly, you're no longer trapped in the emotion, you're studying it. That's the Stoic secret. Writing becomes a mirror, then a lever, and finally a compass. Your words today might never be read by emperors like Marcus were, but they'll shape something far more important, the empire of your own mind. Epictetus offered a counterintuitive piece of wisdom that still stops people in their tracks today. Practice hardship occasionally, so when it comes unbidden, you'll be prepared. What sounds like masochism is actually mental judo. Those who voluntarily step into discomfort aren't punishing themselves, they're immunizing themselves against life's inevitable shocks. Imagine 2 athletes, one who only trains in perfect weather, another who practices in rain, wind, and scorching heat. When game day brings storms, who thrives? That's the power of voluntary discomfort, not just building tolerance but transforming vulnerability into strength. Modern science catches up to ancient wisdom. Here, cold showers trigger a flood of norepinephrine, sharpening focus. Fasting resets metabolic flexibility, teaching the body to adapt. Digital detoxes rewire attention spans, but the Stoic purpose runs deeper than biological hacks. When you choose to skip a meal, you're not just regulating blood sugar, you're dismantling the lie that comfort equals safety. When you leave your phone behind for a day, you're not just reducing screen time, you're proving to yourself that stillness won't destroy you. Every voluntary no to ease is a yes to your own sovereignty. Try this experiment for 1 week. Adopt a single intentional discomfort. Maybe it's waking 30 minutes earlier without hitting snooze, taking cold showers, or walking everywhere within a 2-mile radius. Notice what happens when the initial resistance fades. That moment when your body stops fighting the cold water and realizes it won't perish. That's the same neural switch that flips when facing bigger adversities: job loss, rejection, grief. You've trained your nervous system to understand discomfort doesn't equal danger. The magic lies in the contrast. After a week of sleeping on a harder mattress, your old bed feels like a cloud. After fasting, ordinary meals taste profound. This isn't about deprivation, it's about resetting your baseline for gratitude. The Stoics called it preferred indifference, preferring comfort but not needing it to stay steady. That's why Epictetus trained with a clay cup instead of fine pottery, so when it shattered, his peace remained intact. Your turn. What's one modern clay cup you can embrace this week? Not to prove toughness, but to rediscover the quiet truth that you've always been sturdier than your comfort suggested. You will die. How does that change today? It's not a morbid thought, it's the ultimate clarifier. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." That's the power of Memento Mori, the ancient practice of remembering mortality, not to paralyze you, but to propel you. Think about how differently you'd approach today if you knew it was your last. Would you waste hours scrolling, or would you write the letter you've been putting off? Would you nurse grudges, or would you mend fences? The Stoics didn't dwell on death to depress themselves. They used it as a whetstone to sharpen their priorities. Modern life conspires to make us forget this. We bury death behind euphemisms, hide it in hospitals, drown it out with endless distractions. But the Stoics would argue we've lost something vital in doing so: the urgency that comes from knowing time is finite. Picture two versions of yourself, one who drifts through days assuming there's always tomorrow, and one who acts as if each conversation could be the last. Which one lives more fully? Which one loves more deeply? Mortality isn't a threat, it's the lens that brings life into focus. Here's a challenge: pick 1 month from your past. Now imagine you'd known it would be your final 30 days. How would you have spent it differently? More sunrises witnessed, more truth spoken, more silly moments with people you love. The gap between those two versions, your actual month and your last month, holds a blueprint for living with fewer regrets. The Stoic question isn't what would you do if you only had a month to live. It's why aren't you doing those things now? Marcus kept a skull on his desk, not for decoration but as a daily reminder. He wrote, "Death's whisper makes the symphony of life play louder." Today, we don't need literal skulls, we have alarms that could serve the same purpose. Every morning, your phone buzzes. What if instead of reaching for it, you paused and asked, if this were my last day, how would I spend the next 16 hours? Not in grand gestures, but in purposeful ones. The email can wait, the sunset can't. The meeting agenda matters less than how you make people feel in the room. Try this tonight. Write down 3 things you'd stop doing immediately if you knew your time was short. Then list 3 you'd start. The first list reveals your distractions, the second, your dormant priorities. That's Memento Mori in action, not as a morbid fixation, but as a tool for cutting through life's noise. As Seneca put it, we don't receive a short life, we make it short by wasting it. Death isn't waiting at the end of your path, it's walking beside you every step, whispering, "Are you spending this breath well?" The answer changes everything. Here's where Stoic philosophy hands you a superpower most people never discover: the split-second gap between what happens to you and how you respond to it. Epictetus called this the discipline of assent, and it works like a mental circuit breaker. Imagine your mind receives thousands of impressions daily: a rude email, a traffic jam, a critical comment. Most people treat these like direct commands to react. Anger flares, stress spikes, emotions hijack reason. But Stoics see impressions differently, not as truths, but as data points waiting for your approval. Picture yourself stuck in bumper-to-bumper traffic. Your first impression might be frustration. This is wasting my time. People can't drive. Now my whole day's ruined. Here's where the discipline kicks in. Press pause. That frustration isn't the traffic's fault. It's your mind's unchecked interpretation of the traffic. Epictetus offers a game-changing reframe. It's not events that disturb us, but our judgments about them. The cars aren't causing your suffering. Your belief that traffic shouldn't exist is. This week, try a simple experiment. Every time a negative impression arises, a coworker's tone, a delayed flight, even stubbing your toe, interrogate it like a scientist examining questionable data. Is this impression factual or just a story you're telling yourself? Could there be 5 other explanations for that curt email? Might the traffic jam have saved you from an accident up ahead? The discipline of assent isn't about suppressing emotions, it's about vetting them before granting them citizenship in your mind. Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily. Don't let the force of an impression when it first hits you knock you off your feet. Modern psychology backs this up. That tiny pause between stimulus and response is where emotional intelligence lives. Neuroscientists call it the 6-second rule, the time it takes for your rational brain to catch up with your emotional flash. The Stoics were mapping this territory 2 millennia ago, proving that self-mastery begins not in controlling the world, but in governing what you choose to believe about it. So tonight, when someone cuts you off in traffic or your Wi-Fi fails at the worst moment, catch that first impression mid-flight. Ask it 3 Stoic questions. Is this absolutely true? Could I be misreading this? And most powerfully, would the person I want to be agree with this thought? That space between event and reaction, once widened through practice, becomes where your freedom lies. Not freedom from life's chaos, but from being its prisoner. Marcus Aurelius carved a truth into history that still blazes today: the impediment becomes the way. Not in spite of the obstacle, but because of it. Consider Demosthenes, the ancient Greek orator whose legacy outshone his beginnings. Born with a debilitating stutter, he could have accepted his fate as unfit for public speech. Instead, he filled his mouth with pebbles and practiced shouting over crashing waves, forging his weakness into legendary eloquence. His story isn't about overcoming, it's about alchemy, the art of turning leaden limitations into golden strength. This principle thrives in modern examples too. Take the inventor who lost his dominant hand in an accident, only to design revolutionary prosthetic technology. Or the writer whose dyslexia forced her to process words differently, birthing a unique narrative style that captivated millions. The pattern repeats through history. What looks like a roadblock from one angle becomes a launching pad from another. The Stoic genius lies in asking not, "Why is this happening to me?" but, "What can this make possible that wasn't before?" Here's your challenge today. Grab a notebook and draw 3 columns. In the first, list 3 current obstacles, maybe a skill gap at work, a financial limitation, or even a personality trait you see as a flaw. Now, in the second column, write how each one might actually serve you. That intimidating project deadline, it could be pressure forging unprecedented focus, the coworker who constantly critiques you, an unexpected mentor in emotional resilience. The final column is where the magic happens. Brainstorm one deliberate action to leverage each obstacle this week. If public speaking terrifies you, commit to voicing one unpopular opinion in a meeting. If time feels scarce, use that constraint to ruthlessly prioritize what matters. Marcus didn't just write about turning obstacles into advantages, he lived it. Plagued by chronic illness during his reign, he used pain as a reminder to focus on what his mind could achieve regardless of his body's betrayals. The barbarian invasions at Rome's borders became his crucible for leadership. Even betrayal from trusted advisors served as material for his meditations on human nature. His journals reveal the secret obstacles don't obstruct the path, they become the training ground for the person who can walk it. Tonight, try this reframe when facing any frustration. What if this isn't happening to you but for you? That delayed flight becomes uninterrupted reading time. The rejection letter redirects you toward a better fitting opportunity. Even grief, the heaviest of obstacles, carves reservoirs of compassion in us that joy never could. The Stoics weren't naive optimists, they were pragmatic alchemists, proving repeatedly that the very things meant to break us often become what build us strongest. Your greatest limitation today might be the raw material for tomorrow's mastery, if you have the courage to work it like Demosthenes worked his pebbles. Seneca, one of Rome's wealthiest men, wrote letters about the indifference of wealth while lounging in marble villas. At first glance, it seems hypocritical until you understand Stoicism's radical distinction between preferred indifference and true good. Imagine holding a priceless gem in your open palm, admiring its beauty but knowing your worth isn't tied to owning it. That's the Stoic relationship with externals: money, status, even health. These things matter, but not in the way we've been conditioned to believe. Their indifference valuable only insofar as they help or hinder our pursuit of virtue. Lose them and you lose tools, not pieces of yourself. Modern culture inverts this wisdom. Social media conflates followers with worth, job titles with identity, luxuries with happiness. But history offers a stark counterpoint. When Nero ordered Seneca into exile, stripping his wealth and status, the philosopher responded not with despair, but with a treatise on how exile couldn't touch what truly mattered: his character, his principles, his freedom to think. Externals had been his to use, not his to need. That's the litmus test. If you couldn't post about it, if no one would ever praise you for it, would it still feel essential? Dig into any anxiety you felt this week. chances are it orbits around an indifferent, a missed promotion, someone's disapproving glance, the fear of falling behind peers. The Stoics wouldn't tell you to quit your job or abandon ambition. Instead, they'd ask, are you chasing these things as tools for living well or as proof that you are well? There's a seismic difference. One path leads to agency, the other to addiction. Try this reframe today. List 3 things you consider markers of success. Now imagine losing them overnight, not hypothetically but vividly. The job vanishes, the bank account empties, the social circle scatters. Who remains beneath those stripped layers? That core self, the one capable of starting over, of finding joy in a simple conversation or a walk at dawn, that's who Seneca became in exile. Not a diminished man, but a liberated one. The irony, those who master indifference to indifference often attract more of them. Marcus Aurelius ruled the known world yet wore plain robes. Musonius Rufus, another Stoic teacher, insisted luxury weakens resilience. What's the point of a soft bed if you can't sleep well on the ground? The lesson isn't austerity for its own sake, but sovereignty. When applause doesn't inflate you, silence can't deflate you. When neither poverty nor wealth alters your peace, you've cracked life's cheat code. You're playing with externals, not being played by them. So here's the challenge. Identify one indifferent you've been overvaluing. Maybe it's your car's make, the size of your apartment, or how often your posts get liked. For a week, practice this Stoic mantra. This is nice to have, but unnecessary to be. Watch what happens when you stop letting these metrics whisper lies about your worth. That's when you'll discover what Seneca knew, that the richest person isn't who has the most, but who needs the least. Seneca's sharpest warning cuts deeper today than it did 2,000 years ago. Life is long if you know how to use it. The tragedy, most of us don't. We stretch our days thin with digital noise, phantom obligations, and the constant drip of notifications that leave us feeling busy but empty. Picture your attention as prime real estate. Every unnecessary app, every mindless scroll, every quick check of your inbox is a squatter occupying space meant for what truly matters. That's the art of subtraction, not just cutting clutter, but reclaiming sovereignty over your most finite resource, time itself. Ancient Rome had its own version of distraction. Seneca lamented how men wasted hours gossiping in baths or chasing political favors. His remedy, ruthless elimination. Be wary, he wrote, of the many who would have you believe they're owed your minutes. Today, those many are algorithms designed to hijack your focus, turning your life into fractions sold to advertisers. But the Stoic solution remains startlingly simple. Remove what doesn't serve your growth and watch meaning expand to fill the space. Here's the experiment that could shift your relationship with time, a 24-hour digital detox. Not as a punishment, but as an archaeological dig into your own potential. Turn off every non-essential screen. No social media, no news feeds, no streaming rabbit holes. What emerges in that silence? Maybe the book you've meant to read for years, the half-finished project that lights you up, or simply the ability to sit with your own thoughts without reaching for digital anesthesia. The first hours feel like withdrawal because that's exactly what it is. Your brain detoxing from dopamine hits it never evolved to handle. Consider how we measure time's value. You wouldn't trade an hour with a dying loved one for 5 hours of random YouTube videos, yet we make these bargains daily by default. Seneca called this poverty of the soul, spending our days on what we'd never choose if death whispered in our ear. His question still pierces. How much of your time has been taken by force, stolen, or wasted? The answer lies in your screen time reports, your calendar's white space, the gap between what you say matters and where your attention actually goes. Start small but surgical. Identify one subtraction that would create disproportionate clarity. Maybe it's muting group chats that drain you, unsubscribing from newsletters you never read, or designating your bedroom a screen-free sanctuary. Like pruning a tree, the goal isn't less life, it's more fruitful growth. That's the paradox Seneca discovered. By removing what dilutes your days, you don't end up with nothing. You uncover everything that's been waiting beneath the noise. Marcus Aurelius left us a compass for navigating life's chaos, not as isolated individuals, but as threads in a vast tapestry. He wrote, "What doesn't benefit the hive doesn't benefit the bee." That's Sympathia, the Stoic art of recognizing you're never truly separate from the world around you. Imagine dropping a pebble into a pond. The ripples don't stop at some arbitrary border, they reshape the entire surface. Your actions work the same way, whether you notice or not. The cashier you thanked warmly carries that energy home to their family. The trash you picked up silently saves a stranger from slipping on wet pavement. Stoicism isn't just personal resilience, it's understanding that your strength exists to ripple outward. This principle pulses through modern science too. Studies show how one act of kindness triggers a chain reaction, the reciprocity wave where people pay generosity forward. Environmental research proves how a single plastic bottle removed from a beach affects oceanic ecosystems for generations. Even quantum physics whispers of entanglement particles influencing each other across vast distances. The Stoics saw this truth intuitively. Your choices don't vanish into a vacuum, they vibrate through the web of existence. Here's where philosophy meets practice. Epictetus trained his students to ask, how does this action serve the whole? Not as abstract virtue signaling, but as daily calibration. When you're tempted to cut in line, gossip, or ignore a struggling coworker, that question becomes a moral speed bump. The ancient Greeks had a word for this: koinonia, the spirit of communal flourishing. Your anonymous act of service isn't just charity, it's realigning yourself with cosmic order. Try this challenge today. Perform one act where you'll never receive credit. Pay for the coffee behind you in the drive-thru and drive away before they can react. Leave a heartfelt note in a library book for future readers. Plant flowers where only birds will witness them. The anonymity isn't about secrecy, it's about purging your ego from the equation. Like Marcus reminding himself, whatever happens to you has been waiting to happen since the beginning of time. Your small act was always part of the tapestry, you're just the hands weaving it. Modern life tricks us into believing we're solo players in private dramas. Social media rewards performative kindness, the viral good deed filmed for likes. But Sympathia thrives in the unseen. Consider the janitor who cleans hospital rooms with extra care, never meeting the patients whose recoveries they unknowingly aid. Or the programmer who fixes a bug anonymously, saving thousands of users from frustration they'll never trace back to them. These are the unsung harmonies of the Stoic symphony, actions that echo because they weren't staged for applause. Tonight, reflect on this. Who in your life functions like water to your root system, quietly sustaining you without fanfare? The neighbor who shovels your walk before dawn. The colleague who double-checks your numbers without being asked. Sympathia asks you to become that hidden sustenance for someone else. Not because it's noble, but because it's how the universe was designed to operate, each part nourishing the whole. When you grasp that your smallest choices are cosmic currents, responsibility transforms from burden to privilege. You're not just living your life, you're co-creating the world. Seneca described anger as a fire that spreads faster than we can extinguish it, but the Stoics discovered a secret about controlling it. The key lies not in suppressing the emotion, but in catching it at what Seneca called the first spark, that split second when anger flickers to life before it engulfs your reasoning. Picture a driver cutting you off on the highway. Your chest tightens, your hands grip the wheel. That's the spark. Most people fan it into flames by muttering insults or tailgating. But Stoics see this moment differently, not as an uncontrollable reaction, but as a choice point where you still hold the match. Ancient Rome had its own version of road rage. Seneca wrote about a man who became so enraged during a chariot race that he burst a blood vessel. 2,000 years later, neuroscience confirms his insight. Anger triggers a flood of cortisol and adrenaline that hijacks rational thought for about 6 seconds. Those seconds are your window. That's why generations have been told to count to 10, though few understand the Stoic wisdom behind it. The numbers aren't magic, they're scaffolding to help you outlast the chemical storm. 10 seconds allows your prefrontal cortex to re-engage, letting you respond instead of react. Consider this twist on the classic technique. Rather than just counting, pair each number with a Stoic question. 1. Is this worth my peace? 2. What would my best self do? 3. Will this matter in a week? By the time you reach 7 or 8, you'll often find the anger has nowhere to land. Like a wave crashing against rocks, it dissipates when met with steady reflection. Try applying this to your last moment of frustration. Maybe it was a rude comment online or a family member pushing your buttons. Play it back in slow motion. Where exactly did the spark ignite? Was it the words themselves or your interpretation of them? Anger always tells a story. They disrespected me. This shouldn't be happening. But Stoicism teaches us to fact-check that narrative. Often you'll find the real fuel isn't the event, but your unexamined beliefs about it. The brilliance of Seneca's approach lies in its realism. He didn't expect people to never feel anger. He knew it's as human as laughter. His goal was to create space between trigger and action, so you're no longer a puppet of primal impulses. Modern psychology validates this with the arousal curve. Anger peaks around the 30-second mark if unmet, then begins to fade. Your job isn't to eliminate the emotion, but to refuse it a vote in your decisions until the tide recedes. Next time anger flares, treat it like an experiment. Notice where in your body you feel it first: a clenched jaw, heated face, racing pulse. That physical awareness alone creates distance, turning you from participant to observer. Then ask Seneca's ultimate question: what would the person I aspire to be do now? Not because anger is wrong, but because it's rarely the most strategic response. Every conflict presents two battles, one with the external trigger and one with your own composure. The Stoics knew which one truly determines victory. History whispers to us through the lives of those who have walked the Stoic path before, not as untouchable heroes, but as compasses pointing toward our own potential. Take Cato the Younger, the Roman senator who chose death over compromising his principles when Julius Caesar seized power. Or Zeno, the shipwrecked merchant who turned personal catastrophe into the founding of Stoicism itself. These aren't just names in old books. They're living proof that the virtues we admire, courage, resilience, integrity, have been tested in the fires of real life. The question isn't what would these figures do, but how can their choices illuminate my own? Creating a virtue checklist transforms ancient wisdom into daily practice. Picture a table with 3 columns. First, list your role models, historical or contemporary. Next, note the specific traits you admire in them. Perhaps Epictetus' unshakable equanimity in hardship, or Marcus Aurelius' discipline in ruling an empire without losing himself. The final column is where the magic happens. Translate those traits into modern actions. If you admire Cato's refusal to bend to political pressure, what does that look like for you? Maybe it's speaking up in a meeting when it's easier to stay silent, or declining to participate in office gossip. Consider the engineer who keeps a quote from Seneca taped to her monitor. Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. Every time she hesitates to tackle a complex problem, those words remind her that mastery isn't about innate genius, it's about showing up. Or the teacher who channels Musonius Rufus' simplicity, turning budget cuts into creative lessons that prove education thrives on passion, not resources. Role models aren't idols to worship. They're mirrors showing us versions of ourselves we've yet to fully become. Try this exercise today. Identify one person, living or historical, whose character speaks to you. Don't just list their achievements, study their crossroads. How did Zeno respond when he lost everything at sea? Not with despair, but with curiosity, asking Athenian booksellers about philosophers who could help him rebuild. That pivot from victim to student holds more practical wisdom than 1,000 motivational quotes. Your personal pantheon of Stoic figures becomes a council of advisors you can convene anytime. Facing a moral dilemma, consult Cotto's uncompromising example. Wrestling with anger, let Seneca's letters on temperance guide you, the most powerful part. You'll start noticing these virtues everywhere, not just in marble statues, but in the co-worker who remains calm under deadline chaos, or the stranger who returns a lost wallet. Role models aren't relics, they're reminders that the best human qualities transcend time. When you consciously collect these examples like gems, something shifts. You begin spotting opportunities to embody their strengths in your own story. That's when philosophy stops being theory and starts breathing through your choices, one inspired act at a time. Epictetus offered a radical idea for our modern age of constant noise. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. In a world where every thought becomes a tweet, every meal gets photographed, and opinions flow faster than facts, Stoic silence isn't just restraint, it's rebellion. Imagine walking through a city where no one checks their phone, where conversations aren't performances for invisible audiences, where the quiet between words holds as much meaning as the words themselves. That's the power you reclaim when you master strategic silence, not as absence but as presence magnified. Consider how different ancient Rome's agora would sound compared to today's digital marketplace. Philosophers like Epictetus didn't speak to fill airtime, they weighed each word like gold. Now we live in an economy where attention is currency and silence feels like bankruptcy. We mistake volume for value, frequency for wisdom, but the Stoics knew a secret silence isn't empty. It's the fertile ground where real understanding grows. When you stop broadcasting, you start receiving. This week, try an experiment that will feel uncomfortable at first. Take 1 meal in complete mindful silence. No podcasts, no scrolling, no rehearsing conversations in your head. Just you, your food, and the act of noticing. You'll discover 2 things immediately: how conditioned we are to numb ourselves with noise and how much flavor we've been missing. That first bite of food eaten in true attention might startle you. Colors seem brighter, textures more vivid, tastes more layered. It's not your senses sharpening, it's your distractions fading. There's a deeper lesson here about listening as the ultimate learning tool. Think about the last time someone truly heard you, not just waited for their turn to speak, but absorbed your words with full attention. That quality of presence is rare because it's demanding. It requires silencing the louder voice, your own inner commentary. The CEO who listens more than she talks gathers intelligence competitors miss. A parent who pauses before reacting builds trust no lecture could achieve. Even nature teaches this: trees grow in silence, oceans deepen without fanfare. Epictetus observed that untrained speakers vomit their words, while the wise let silence season their speech. Notice how often we fill pauses out of discomfort: awkward dates, nervous interviews, tense meetings. But what if those gaps became opportunities? The musician knows rests make the notes meaningful. The painter values negative space as much as brushstrokes. Your turn. Let today's conversations breathe. Try counting 3 full seconds before responding, not as a trick but as respect for the other person's words and for your own considered reply. Tomorrow's challenge holds hidden gold: that silent meal. Don't approach it as deprivation, frame it as excavation. You're not losing noise, you're recovering signals buried beneath it: the hum of your refrigerator you've tuned out, the texture of your own breathing, the way sunlight moves across the table. These aren't small things, they're the overlooked threads of aliveness we trade for distraction. When Seneca advised retreat into yourself, he wasn't suggesting isolation. He was pointing to that rich inner landscape we ignore while curating our outer one. The modern world fears silence like nature abhors a vacuum. We rush to fill it with playlists, podcasts, background TV. But the Stoics whisper a counterintuitive truth: what feels like missing out is actually tuning in. That silent meal won't just change how you eat, it will reveal how you live. Are you consuming to nourish or to numb, speaking to connect or to convince? Every unnecessary word you don't say is space reclaimed for better words, deeper thoughts, truer connections. Epictetus didn't advocate silence because words lacked value, but because they carried too much to waste. The Stoics spoke of an impossible ideal, the sage, a figure of perfect wisdom who never errs, never wavers, always acts with virtue. But here's the liberating truth buried in that aspiration: the sage wasn't meant to be achieved, only approached. Like a horizon that guides sailors but can never be reached, this ideal exists not to shame us with our flaws, but to orient us toward growth. Consider Cleans, the second leader of the Stoic school, a former boxer who worked nights drawing water to support his studies, whose early writings were so rough his peers mocked them. Yet this same man became Zeno's successor, not because he was perfect, but because he was persistent. His story whispers an essential lesson: wisdom isn't about never stumbling, it's about always rising. What makes the sage so powerful as an ideal is its refusal to let us off the hook with easy excuses. Imagine two people facing the same setback. One thinks this is unfair, while the other asks, what would the sage do here? That shift alone changes everything. The sage doesn't eliminate hardship, they transform how hardship is met. When you're stuck in traffic, the sage doesn't rage, they use the time for reflection. When criticized unfairly, the sage doesn't lash out, they mine the criticism for kernels of truth. The magic lies in the question itself, not some unattainable standard. History gives us flawed giants who walked this path. Take Seneca the advisor, brilliant yet entangled in Nero's corrupt court, writing about virtue while accumulating wealth. Some call him a hypocrite, Stoics see a mirror. His contradictions don't invalidate his wisdom, they humanize it. The sage ideal isn't a yardstick to measure our failures, but a compass to navigate them. Those nightly journals where Seneca examined his day, that was his practice of bridging the gap between who he was and who he aspired to be, not in one grand leap, but through daily stitches of self-awareness. Here's how to make this practical today. Choose one sage-like quality to embody for the next 24 hours. Not some grand virtue, but a specific, actionable trait. Maybe it's responding to provocation with patience, as Epictetus did when insults landed. Perhaps it's finding opportunity in obstacles, like Marcus Aurelius turning sleepless nights into writing sessions for meditations. The key is narrow focus. Don't try to be wise. Simply ask, what would the sage's next action be in this conversation, this chore, this moment of frustration? There's reason the Stoics imagine the sage as both beacon and mirror. It reflects back not who we are, but who we might become through consistent practice. Your sage won't look like Seneca's or Clean's. It will bear your unique scars and strengths. That colleague who stays calm under fire, that stranger who radiates kindness in line at the DMV, these are modern sages in fragments, showing us that wisdom isn't a destination but a direction. The question isn't whether you'll reach perfection today, but whether you'll take one unmistakable step toward it. Marcus Aurelius began each dawn with a razor-sharp mental exercise. He'd brace himself for the day's inevitable frustrations by whispering, "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly." Not because he expected the worst in others, but because he refused to be caught off guard by human nature. This wasn't pessimism, it was emotional armor forged in the quiet of morning. Today, we'd call this cognitive inoculation, and science backs it up. A 2,000-year-old ritual that still prepares the mind to meet chaos with calm. Your modern version doesn't require imperial robes or a scroll, just 5 minutes and a notebook. Before reaching for your phone or drowning in emails, steal this Stoic secret. Sit upright, breathe deeply, and script your intentions. Not vague affirmations, but concrete mental preparations. Traffic will test my patience. I'll use it as audiobook time. My coworker's criticism may sting. I'll mine it for useful feedback. Like a general reviewing battle plans, you're anticipating skirmishes to stay centered when they erupt. Seneca captured this perfectly. The mind must be given relaxation. It will rise improved and sharper after a good break. Just as rich fields must not be forced, so constant work on the mind will break its vigor. Challenge yourself this week. Craft a morning ritual with 3 Stoic components. First, grounding, 60 seconds of silence, feeling your feet on the floor, remembering Epictetus' reminder that you control your judgments, not external events. Second, intention setting. Name one virtue you'll embody today. Maybe patience during your commute or courage in a difficult conversation. Third, premeditation. Visualize one predictable stressor and rehearse your calm response. That's the alchemy turning leaden predictability into golden preparedness. Consider the surgeon who methodically lays out instruments before an operation, or the firefighter who checks gear before the alarm sounds. Your morning ritual is no different. You're preparing to perform under pressure. The parent who mentally rehearses patience before waking toddlers isn't being negative. They're stacking the deck for resilience. What makes this stoic is the shift from reaction to readiness. You're not waiting for the day to happen to you. You're deciding in advance how you'll engage with it. Here's the twist most miss. This ritual works precisely because it's uneventful. The mornings you prepare for chaos and none comes aren't wasted. They're proof your mindset shifted the odds. Like an umbrella that keeps rain away by its mere presence, the act of preparation often prevents the very turmoil you rehearsed. That's Stoicism's quiet superpower, not just enduring storms, but changing the weather patterns of your mind. Your experiment starts tomorrow. Set a 6 a.m. alarm if you must, but better yet, go to bed 15 minutes earlier and claim those moments upon waking. The Romans called this the hora prima, the sacred first hour when the world is still and your mind most pliable. No grand gestures needed, just a few intentional breaths, a whispered reminder of your agency, and the unshakable knowledge that whatever today brings, you've already met it in the arena of your morning mind. As daylight fades and the world grows quiet, Seneca would light a single lamp and turn inward, not to berate himself for imperfections, but to converse with his own soul like a wise mentor reviewing a student's progress. His nightly ritual wasn't about guilt or tallying failures. It was a gentle excavation of the day's lessons. Picture a gardener examining tender shoots, not uprooting them in frustration when growth seems slow, but noting which branches need support and where the soil might be enriched. That's the spirit of the Stoic Evening Audit: curiosity over condemnation, clarity over criticism. Try this tonight before sleep scrambles your thoughts. Take 5 minutes with 2 simple questions. First, where did I act in alignment with my values today? Maybe you paused before snapping at a loved one, or chose deep work over distraction when fatigue tempted you toward mindless scrolling. These aren't small victories, they're the building blocks of character. The second question requires more courage. Where did externals hijack my peace? That meeting where you bristled at feedback, the moment you compared yourself to someone's social media highlight reel. These aren't failures, but flashing arrows pointing to where your practice needs sharpening. What makes this practice revolutionary is its structure. Unlike vague journaling prompts that leave you circling the same frustrations, Seneca's framework creates measurable progress. Over 3 nights, patterns emerge like constellations. You might notice how hunger subtly erodes your patience, or how social media consumption dims your focus for hours afterward. One executive discovered his most reactive moments consistently hit 90 minutes after lunch, a blood sugar dip masquerading as poor judgment. Another realized her productive late-night emails often required next-day damage control. The audit doesn't just reveal weaknesses, it hands you a map to navigate them. Consider the surgeon's post-op review. No drama, just data. The incision here could have been cleaner. This suture held well. That's the tone to bring to your nightly examen. When Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The mind adapts and converts to its own purposes the obstacle to its acting," he was describing this very alchemy, turning stumbles into stepping stones. Your irritation at the grocery store checkout line isn't just a bad mood, it's a signal that patience needs training. The forgotten gym session isn't laziness, it's intelligence revealing a schedule flaw. Here's how to begin. Set a phone reminder for 30 minutes before bedtime. Keep your audit tool simple, a notes app, voice memo, or dedicated notebook. Start with just one observation per question, no novels required. The magic lies in consistency, not volume. As the days stack up, you'll notice something peculiar. The mere act of anticipating your evening review begins shaping your daytime choices. That's the Stoic feedback loop in action. Awareness begets better decisions, which fuel greater awareness. Seneca's original practice included a third layer. What will I improve tomorrow? Not sweeping resolutions, but surgical adjustments. If today's audit revealed snapping at colleagues when hungry, tomorrow's plan might include almonds in your desk drawer. If social comparison stole your joy, perhaps a morning ritual of listing 3 personal progress points. This isn't self-help, it's self-honesty, the kind that transforms nightly reflection from passive accounting to active architecture of your better self. The true test comes when you hit a rough day, when temper flares or discipline crumbles. That's when the audit proves its worth. Unlike shame that paralyzes, this practice meets missteps with a quiet question. What does this reveal about where my training needs focus? There's radical power in that shift, from I failed to I'm learning. Your evening pages become a mirror showing not just who you were today, but who you're gradually becoming through these nightly conversations with your highest self. Marcus Aurelius envisioned an unshakable stronghold within each of us, what he called the Inner Citadel, a mental fortress where our true self remains untouched by external chaos. Picture a medieval castle with towering stone walls. Outside, the world rages with storms and sieges, but inside, in the quiet courtyard, there's peace and clarity. That's your mind at its most resilient, not by avoiding life's battles, but by building defenses so robust that no insult, failure, or negativity can breach your core. The brilliance of this metaphor, it doesn't require escaping reality, just architecting sacred space within it. Modern psychology echoes this ancient insight with the concept of psychological boundaries. Think of a coworker who constantly dumps complaints onto your desk, not just tasks but emotional baggage. Without strong walls, their negativity becomes your adrenaline, their crisis your sleepless night. But with an inner citadel, you learn to hear without absorbing, to empathize without enmeshing. You might still help solve the problem, but you're no longer collateral damage to their panic. The key isn't heartlessness, it's discernment, knowing when to engage and when to retreat behind your mental battlements. Here's how to fortify your citadel in real time. During a tense meeting, when voices rise and fingers point, practice this triad. Pause, anchor, respond. First, pause physically. Take a sip of water or adjust your posture to disrupt the emotional momentum. Next, anchor mentally. Recall Marcus' words. The mind adapts and converts to its own purposes the obstacle to its acting. Finally, respond deliberately, not with reactive heat, but with the precision of someone defending high ground. Maybe it's saying, let's table this until we can discuss solutions, or simply listening while internally noting, this isn't about me. your challenge this week. Conduct an architectural review of your mental fortress. Walk its perimeter like a sentinel checking for weak spots. Where do others' moods seep under your gates? Is it your partner's stress that hijacks your evening, or social media comparisons that scale your walls? Each breach point reveals where your defenses need reinforcement. Try this exercise after any interaction that leaves you drained. Jot down what penetrated your peace. Was it the tone used, a particular trigger, or your own unmet expectation? Awareness alone begins the repair work. The Stoic twist: your citadel isn't just for defense, it's the command center for proactive virtue. Within those walls, you decide what merits your energy and what gets released like arrows over the ramparts. That colleague's passive-aggressive email doesn't get a seat at your inner council. Your child's laughter does. The traffic jam can't storm your gates if you've already welcomed a podcast that enriches you. Marcus didn't build his citadel to hide from life, but to engage with it from unassailable clarity. Your turn. What will you station at the heart of your fortress this week? Not weapons, but values. Not fear, but purpose, because the true test of any stronghold isn't how it weathers sieges, but what grows undisturbed within its walls. Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher who ate simple meals from earthenware bowls and slept on hard beds, had a radical idea: voluntary poverty, not as punishment but as training. He wrote, "To withstand heat and cold, thirst and hunger, such training is good for the body, but the deeper wisdom lies in what this reveals about our minds." Picture your last 10 purchases. How many sprang from actual need versus habitual craving? That's where the modern no-spend weekend becomes a Stoic laboratory. Not cutting expenses out of scarcity, but choosing restraint to rediscover abundance hidden in plain sight. Try this experiment. Pick one Saturday where money doesn't leave your hands. No takeout coffee, no impulse downloads, not even that irresistible thrift store find. At first, you'll notice phantom urges, the reflex to check shopping apps, or the twinge when passing your favorite bakery. But by sunset, something shifts. You might rediscover the library card buried in your wallet, or the half-finished novel gathering dust on your shelf. The park bench you've walked past for months becomes a front-row seat to an impromptu concert of birdsong and rustling leaves. Poverty practiced deliberately isn't deprivation, it's a spotlight revealing how much we already own. Here's the challenge Musonius would propose: list 10 joys that cost nothing but enrich everything. Morning sunlight painting your walls gold, the way your dog's entire body wags when you walk in the door. Laughter shared over a potluck meal where everyone brings leftovers instead of gourmet dishes. Notice how these aren't substitutes for real pleasures. They're the foundational delights we've papered over with transactions. Ancient Stoics knew what behavioral economists now confirm. The thrill of new purchases fades fast, while simple, repeated joys compound like interest in a happiness bank. Consider how this practice recalibrates your relationship with want. That itch to buy the newest phone feels different after a weekend remembering how perfectly your current one works. The gym membership guilt dissolves when you realize push-ups in your living room and sprinting up staircases cost nothing but effort. Musonius wasn't advocating sackcloth and misery. He was teaching discernment, the ability to separate luxury from necessity, fleeting dopamine hits from enduring contentment. Tonight, try this: walk through your home and catalog 20 items you haven't used in a month. Not with guilt, but curiosity, that juicer gathering dust. It whispers how enthusiasm often outpaces habit. The unworn gift sweater, a reminder that taste can't be outsourced. The Stoic twist comes next. For each unused item, identify a free alternative you've neglected. That juicer's ghost points to the oranges you could simply peel and enjoy. The sweater's tag still attached hints at the old hoodie you instinctively reach for because it feels like home. What makes voluntary poverty transformative isn't the austerity, it's the realization that our richest moments often arrive unbilled. The philosopher Diogenes, who lived in a barrel, once shocked Alexander the Great by asking him to move aside. He was blocking the sun. That's the radical freedom Musonius invites us to taste, not rejecting wealth but mastering our dependence on it. Your no-spend weekend might end with an unexpected discovery that the heaviest chains aren't gold or debt, but the unconscious belief that joy must always come with a price tag. Epictetus faced insults with a smirk and a shrug, not because he lacked feeling, but because he'd mastered a brutal truth. Words only wound when you grant them permission. His advice cuts through centuries like a scalpel. Remember, it's not the person who insults you that harms you, but your own belief that you've been harmed. Picture a playground bully hurling rocks. The real damage isn't from the stones that miss, but from the one you clutch in your fist long after they've walked away. That's the Stoic secret to insults. Drop the rock. Consider how differently two people handle the same rude comment. One spirals into rage, crafting rebuttals they'll never send, while the other chuckles and moves on. The insult didn't differ, the interpretation did. Epictetus trained his students to see verbal attacks like bad weather, inconvenient but not personal. When someone sneered at his limp, a relic of his slavery, he'd quip, "I might drag my leg, but must I also drag your opinion of it?" Humor wasn't deflection, it was sovereignty, proof that his worth wasn't up for public vote. Try this mental switch next time insults land. Ask yourself, whose opinion actually holds weight in my life, not abstractly but concretely? Make a shortlist, perhaps a mentor whose judgment sharpens you, a partner who sees your flaws and loves you anyway, or the version of yourself you're striving to become. When you solidify that inner counsel, random insults dissolve like sugar in rain. The cashier's snide remark, the internet troll's vitriol, they're not on the committee that defines you. Role play shifts theory into muscle memory. Imagine a coworker dismisses your idea in a meeting with "that's naive." The untrained mind might retaliate or shrink, but the Stoic response has 3 gears. First, silence, letting the words hang without oxygen to fuel them. Second, humor, naive, maybe, but I prefer, optimistically rebellious. Third, curiosity, what specifically feels unrealistic to you. This isn't about winning, it's about refusing to let someone else's mood hijack your equilibrium. History brims with masters of this art. When Zeno was mocked for his frugal meals, he'd set an extra place at his table and announce, "You must need this more than I do." The poet Emily Dickinson, when criticized for her unconventional punctuation, replied, "I dwell in possibility." These aren't clapbacks, they're boundary markers, signaling that the insulter's words stop at the doorstep of soul. The deeper practice lies in preemptive immunity. Marcus Aurelius wrote daily reminders like, "It's ridiculous not to flee from your own wickedness, yet spend energy trying to correct others." Translation: if you're secure in your own growth, someone's petty jab says more about their inner turmoil than your worth. Try this tonight. Write down 3 insults that stung you this year. Now, beside each, note what they revealed about your unhealed insecurities. That colleagues dig about your presentation skills might point to your own perfectionism. The relatives barb about your life choices could mirror your unresolved need for approval. Here's the paradoxical truth: the less you armor yourself against insults, the less they penetrate. Like a reed that bends in wind but never breaks, Stoic resilience comes from knowing which battles are worth your breath. Epictetus put it bluntly: if someone handed you their body and said, "Do whatever you want with me," you'd find it grotesque. Yet we hand people our minds every day. Your turn. Whose hands have you been leaving your peace in? And what would change if you took it back? Seneca stared into the flickering lamplight of ancient Rome and saw the same demon that haunts our smartphones today, the thief of time. He wrote, "Life is long if you know how to use it," exposing the lie we tell ourselves about not having enough hours. The truth, we all get the same 24 Caesar and couch potato alike. Modern life hasn't made time scarce, it's made distraction abundant. That's why the Stoic approach to time isn't about squeezing more in, but about fiercely protecting what matters. Imagine your attention as currency. Every unnecessary meeting attended, every scroll through vapid content, is wealth handed to strangers while your dreams go unfunded. The irony of our age is that we've never been more busy while accomplishing less of substance. Seneca spotted this 20 centuries ago when he mocked those who are preoccupied with being busy, running to appointments they created, chasing status that leaves them hollow. Real productivity isn't motion, it's direction. Consider two workers, one who answers emails all day feeling drained, another who blocks 3 sacred hours for deep work and leaves the afternoon refreshed. Both put in time, but only one invested it. Time blocking isn't some modern hack, it's Stoic wisdom repackaged. When you assign each hour a purpose before dawn, you become the emperor of your day rather than its beggar. Here's the experiment that will recalibrate your relationship with time. Track every minute for 24 hours like an anthropologist studying your own habits. Carry a notebook and mark whether each activity was an investment, an obligation, or an escape. You'll discover pockets of wasted potential. The 40 minutes lost to social media while coffee cools, the hour spent rearranging tasks instead of executing them. Seneca called this poverty of the soul, a spending our most finite resource on what we'd never choose if mortality whispered in our ear. The magic happens in the gap between what you say matters and where your attention actually goes. That parent who complains of no time for hobbies but watches 3 hours of reality TV nightly isn't lacking hours. They're lacking boundaries. The entrepreneur who dreams of writing a book but checks email 90 times a day isn't overworked, they're under-disciplined. Ancient Stoics had a remedy for this. They divided the day into intentional segments. Study in the cool morning, physical labor when the sun was high, reflection as light faded. No alarms needed, just rhythms aligned with nature and purpose. Your challenge starts tonight. Map tomorrow's hours before they map you. Block time for 3 priorities first, not chores or reactions, but investments in your future self. Maybe it's an hour mastering a skill, 30 minutes planning meals for health, or 15 minutes of journaling to sharpen judgment. Guard these blocks like a Spartan at Thermopylae. Let trivial requests pile up outside the gates. You'll quickly spot the difference between genuine emergencies and the laziness of others masquerading as your emergency. Seneca's deepest insight wasn't about managing time, but about confronting its true nature. "We're tight-fisted with property and money," he observed, "yet wasteful with time. The one thing it's honorable to be greedy about. That meeting you dread but attend out of politeness. Those notifications you check reflexively, each is a tiny betrayal of your potential. The Stoic alternative isn't ruthless efficiency, but ruthless meaning. When you start seeing minutes as lifeblood rather than currency, everything changes. You stop killing time and start reviving the parts of yourself you've been starving with distraction. Tonight, as you review your time audit, ask not just where did I waste, but what does this reveal about my fears? Procrastination on that business plan might mask terror of failure. Endless chores could be hiding avoidance of creative work that matters. Time management isn't about spreadsheets, it's about courage, the guts to face what you've been putting off, and the wisdom to know that every yes to distraction is a no to your unlived potential. The sand in the hourglass falls the same for all. What differs is whether we build castles with it or let it slip through our fingers unremarked. The Stoics played a mental game far more powerful than modern worry. They called it Premeditatio Malorum, but you can think of it as strategic what-if scenarios. Picture your mind as a chessboard where every potential disaster is a move you've already anticipated and countered. When Seneca imagined losing his wealth or Epictetus rehearsed being insulted, They weren't inviting misery, they were inoculating themselves against panic. Here's how to make this ancient drill work for your modern anxieties. Start with your biggest what-if and force it to the logical extreme. Take the fear of job loss, a very real concern in any economy. Most people's mental stopgap is vague optimism. I'll figure it out. Stoics go deeper. Grab a notebook and answer with brutal practicality. What exactly would I do the next morning? Your first move might be updating your resume, then messaging 3 contacts in your network. By day 3, you're researching side hustles that align with your skills. Within a week, you've audited expenses, pausing subscriptions and negotiating bills. This isn't pessimism, it's empowerment through rehearsal. Like a fire drill, the act of walking through steps before crisis strikes leaves you cool-headed when others combust. History's greatest strategists used this method. Dwight Eisenhower famously said, "Plans are worthless, but planning is everything." He knew that the process of gaming out scenarios, not the rigid adherence to them, built adaptable resilience. Your what-if game works the same way. That looming fear of a health crisis, play it out. Who would drive you to appointments? How would your work adapt? What preventative measures could you take now? The goal isn't to dwell on disaster, but to dismantle its power by exposing the lie that you'd be helpless. Try this tonight with a fear you've been avoiding. Divide your page into 2 columns, scenario and stoic response. Under scenario, write your worst case: being sued, a breakup, a market crash. In the response column, outline 3 concrete actions you'd take, plus 1 virtue you'd call upon. For instance, facing a lawsuit might require patience to research legal aid, courage to face the process, and wisdom to distinguish real threats from noise. Suddenly, the monster under your bed has a blueprint for defeat. The genius of this practice lies in its paradox. By regularly visiting imaginary rock bottom, you rarely end up there. Musonius Rufus trained his students to sleep on the ground occasionally, not because he hated mattresses, but to prove they could thrive without luxury. Your what-if game serves the same purpose, proving to yourself that even if the worst happens, you're not just a victim, you're a strategist with moves ready. Here's your challenge. Pick one what-if that's been haunting your periphery. Maybe it's a business failing, a relationship ending, or a diagnosis you dread. Now, write the first 5 steps you'd take, not in vague generalities, but with dollar amounts, contact names, and calendar dates. Notice what happens when the boogeyman of your imagination meets the daylight of planning. More often than not, you'll find what the Stoics did, that the anticipation carries more weight than the event itself, and that you've always been more resourceful than your fears allowed you to believe. Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher who trained in philosophy while swinging a blacksmith's hammer, saw something modern science now confirms. Your mind doesn't reside just in your skull. It courses through your limbs, your lungs, even the calluses on your hands. He wrote, "How could someone unable to endure cold, hunger, or physical labor possibly withstand the far greater hardships of the soul?" That's the Stoic body principle in its rawest form. Physical stamina isn't separate from mental resilience, it's the foundation. Imagine trying to meditate with a caffeine tremor, or staying calm in crisis while battling a sugar crash. Your muscles and metabolism aren't just biological details, they're the unseen architects of your willpower. History's greatest thinkers were often its most physical. Marcus Aurelius began his days with wrestling and weight training before governing an empire. Clean's successor to Zeno financed his philosophy studies by hauling water at night. His nickname was the water carrier. These weren't men who saw exercise as vanity or distraction. They recognized that lifting weights strengthens more than biceps. It forges the discipline to lift your mind. Life gets heavy. Modern research echoes this. Regular exercise doesn't just boost endorphins, it thickens the prefrontal cortex, the brain's command center for self-control. Every drop of sweat is tuition paid at the School of Resilience. Here's how to put this into action. Start with a daily 10-minute movement ritual. Not to sculpt abs or run marathons, but to train what Musonius called the discipline of consent. Your workout becomes a microcosm for life's larger battles, when your muscles burn at minute 7 and your brain screams to quit, continuing for 3. More reps is Stoicism in motion. It's not about the calories burned, it's about overriding the instinct for comfort. Try pairing each movement with a mantra. Push-ups become this too shall pass. Squats turn into obstacles fuel me. Suddenly, exercise isn't something you do. It's training for everything else you face. The body-mind connection reveals itself in unexpected ways. That afternoon slump where willpower evaporates, often just dehydration in disguise, the anxiety that feels existential. Sometimes a restless body mislabeled as a troubled mind. The Stoics didn't have our science, but they grasped the principle. Neglecting physical health is like expecting a sword to stay sharp while letting it rust. Your 10-minute movement session becomes more than fitness. It's preventive maintenance for your decision-making machinery. Tonight, conduct an audit with 2 questions. First, when did my physical state undermine my best intentions? Maybe it was snapping at your partner because you skipped lunch, or procrastinating on a project while battling a caffeine crash. Second, what's one small change that could shift this? Not a drastic overhaul, just drinking water before coffee, taking walking meetings, or stretching during TV commercials. Musonius would applaud the simplicity. He ate plain food from clay bowls, not because he hated flavor, but to prove joy didn't depend on extravagance. Your body isn't a temple to be perfected. It's the plow you use to till the fields of your potential. There's a reason Stoics favored cold baths and rough clothing, not as punishment but as calibration. Discomfort, when chosen, becomes a teacher rather than a tyrant. That soreness after 10 minutes of burpees, it whispers you're capable of more than you thought. The steady breath regained after sprinting stairs murmurs, recovery always follows exertion. Your body isn't just carrying your brain through life, it's schooling it. When Musonius declared the philosopher's school is a hospital, he meant healing starts not with abstract ideas, but with the concrete reality of breath, motion, and sweat. Your 10-minute daily commitment isn't fitness, it's philosophy in action, proving again and again that you can endure, adapt, and rise stronger. Marcus Aurelius stared at the grand monuments of Rome and saw what most citizens missed: their inevitable decay. He wrote in his private journal, Alexander the Great and his mule driver both died, the same fate awaited both. That's the Stoic long view in its rawest form. The recognition that all empires crumble, all fame fades, and the applause you chase today will be as forgotten as the graffiti on ancient walls. Fast forward 2,000 years and nothing's changed except the scale of our illusions. We trade sleep for promotions that won't matter when the company rebrands, obsess over social media metrics that evaporate like morning fog, and sacrifice relationships for achievements that won't even make our obituaries. The antidote, a simple question that slices through short-term noise. Will this matter in a decade? History's greatest leveler isn't death, it's time. Walk through any museum and you'll find statues of leaders who swore their legacy would last forever, now gathering dust with their names barely legible. The Roman Emperor Hadrian built a wall across Britain to secure his empire. Today it's a tourist attraction with souvenir shops selling keychains. That viral tweet you're agonizing over. The CEO title you're killing yourself to earn. They're modern versions of Hadrian's wall, seemingly solid in the moment, but ultimately just another layer in archaeology's dig site. The Stoic long view isn't about dismissing ambition, it's about aligning it with what actually endures. Try this mental exercise tonight, the 100-year test. Picture yourself as a future ancestor leafing through a family album. That stressful project deadline, the awkward social gaffe, the stock dip that ruined your week, will they even register a century from now? Contrast that with the choices that will echo through generations, the kindness you showed a struggling neighbor, the courage to pursue work that lit your soul on fire, the moment you prioritized presence over productivity. Time doesn't just reveal what mattered, it obliterates what didn't. Modern culture feeds us lies wrapped in urgency. Act now, limited time offer, this opportunity won't last. The Stoics would laugh at this hysteria. Seneca observed, "We're tight-fisted with money but reckless with time, the one thing it's honorable to be greedy about." That's the pivot point, shifting from fearing missing out to fearing wasting your one irreplaceable resource. When you start evaluating decisions through the 100-year lens, whole categories of stress vanish. That passive-aggressive email from a colleague, irrelevant dust in 5 years. The obsession with keeping up with trends, a future punchline. The magic of this perspective lies in its paradox. Focusing on the long view makes your present richer. Imagine two artists, one painting solely for gallery sales, the other crafting pieces meant to outlive them. The latter doesn't just create better art, they experience deeper joy in each brushstroke. Your career, relationships, and personal growth work the same way. That difficult conversation you've been avoiding might sting today but could save a decade of resentment. The skill you're tempted to half-learn could become the foundation for work that sustains your grandchildren. The Stoic long view isn't about sacrificing now for later. It's about recognizing that the seeds you plant today determine the forest you'll never see. Practical application starts with a simple nightly audit. Keep a notebook by your bed and ask, what did I do today that will matter in 10 years? Some nights the answer might be nothing, and that's the problem. Other nights you'll surprise yourself. That hour spent reading to your child, the apology you finally offered, the creative project you worked on instead of binge watching. Over weeks, patterns emerge like constellations. You'll spot the difference between motion and meaning, between chasing external validation and building internal legacy. Marcus left us the ultimate litmus test. Ask yourself as each action arises, how does this fit into the grand scheme? Not as an abstract exercise, but with concrete vision. That argument you're about to escalate, will its resolution matter by next summer? The luxury car purchase that requires 80-hour workweeks, will it bring more joy than the missed birthdays and quiet mornings it costs? The long view isn't a distant telescope, it's a mirror showing you who you're becoming with every yes and no. Here's the twist: embracing temporality doesn't diminish life, it intensifies it. Knowing the sandcastle will wash away makes the building more sacred. The Stoics didn't dwell on mortality to depress themselves, but to distill their days into what truly mattered. Your turn. What's one choice you'd make differently today if you saw your life as future history, not as a call to grandeur, but to authenticity? Because a century from now, no one will remember your job title, but the ripples of your courage and kindness might still be touching lives you'll never meet. Imagine your emotions as a boiling pot. The second you remove it from heat, the bubbles settle. That's the essence of the Stoic pause, a practice Marcus Aurelius called the hour rule. When anger, frustration, or hurt flares up, impose a mandatory 60-minute reflection period before responding. Here's why this works. Emotions aren't facts, they're weather patterns passing through your mind. React in the storm, and you'll say what you regret. Wait for the clouds to part and clarity emerges. Last winter, I nearly torched a professional relationship over a terse email. The message felt like a deliberate slight, a colleague taking credit for my idea. My fingers flew across the keyboard, drafting a scathing reply, but somewhere between typing and hitting send, Epictetus' voice echoed in my head. No man is free who is not master of himself. I closed the laptop, walked to a cafe, and ordered tea. By the time steam stopped rising from the cup, my perspective had shifted. What initially seemed like malice was likely haste, a busy person firing off notes without nuance. The response I eventually sent, measured, curious, void of accusations. Their reply, an apology for the oversight and praise for my professionalism. That hour of restraint saved months of tension. The neuroscience behind this is fascinating. When emotions surge, your amygdala, the brain's alarm system, hijacks rational thought for roughly 27 minutes. The hour rule isn't arbitrary, it's biological warfare against impulsivity. Ancient Stoics didn't have fMRI machines, but they observed something timeless. Decisions made in emotional peaks differ radically from those made in valleys. Seneca described anger as brief insanity, a fire that burns brightest when fed fastest. Deny it oxygen and it starves. Your challenge today is surgical. Practice the pause just once before speaking. Not in monumental moments, but in mundane ones, when your partner leaves dishes in the sink again, or a driver cuts you off. Notice the physical cues first: the clenched jaw, the heated cheeks. Then deploy the 3-step Stoic intercept. Breathe in for 4 counts, hold for 7, exhale for 8. This isn't just relaxation, it's a neurological reset triggering your parasympathetic nervous system. Next, ask, will this matter in 10 days? Most irritants shrink under that lens. Finally, if action is still needed, draft it like a diplomat, with precision, not passion. History's master strategists used variations of this rule. Abraham Lincoln wrote hot letters to vent anger, then stored them unsigned in his desk. Queen Elizabeth, I adopted a policy of sleeping on major decisions, knowing night would temper daylight emotions. The modern equivalent, that text message left in drafts overnight, often gets deleted by morning. What feels urgent in the moment rarely withstands an hour's scrutiny. Tonight, conduct a postmortem on your pause. Did waiting reveal hidden context? Did the emotion lose its edge? Like training wheels for emotional intelligence, the hour rule doesn't eliminate feelings. It teaches them to ride steady. With practice, the space between trigger and response widens naturally. You'll start catching reactions mid-formation, not after they've escaped your lips. That's the true Stoic superpower, not suppressing storms, but sensing them early enough to adjust your sails. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, didn't begin as a philosopher. He started as a shipwrecked merchant who lost everything at sea. Stranded in Athens with nothing but the clothes on his back, he wandered into a bookstore, stumbled upon Socrates' teachings, and asked the bookseller where he could find such wisdom. That question led him to Crates, a philosopher who gave him a simple instruction: carry a pot of lentil soup through the crowded marketplace. Every time Zeno hesitated, embarrassed by the stares and laughter, Crates would smash the pot at his feet, forcing him to confront his fear of judgment again and again. What seemed like a trivial exercise was actually the foundation of Stoicism mastery, built through daily, deliberate practice. This is the power of incremental progress, not dramatic overnight transformations, but small, consistent steps that compound into unshakable resilience. Modern science calls this the aggregation of marginal gains, the idea that improving by just 1% daily leads to exponential growth over time. A musician doesn't master the piano in a week of intense practice. They build skill through 15 minutes of focused scales every morning. A runner doesn't conquer a marathon by pushing to exhaustion. Once they follow a training plan that gradually increases mileage. Even the mightiest oak grows from a single acorn, one ring at a time. The Stoics understood this long before atomic habits became a buzzword. Epictetus taught, no great thing is created suddenly, while Seneca observed, every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. Take fitness as a case study. Imagine 2 people, one vows to work out for 2 hours daily, overhauling their diet and sleep overnight. The other commits to 5 push-ups every morning before brushing their teeth. Who's more likely to sustain their habit? The first burns out within weeks, overwhelmed by the drastic change. The second barely notices the effort at first, but after a month, those push-ups feel incomplete without a follow-up plank. By year's end, they've unconsciously built a full routine, not through willpower, but through repetition so effortless it became autopilot. That's the alchemy of micro-habits. They bypass resistance by making action smaller than avoidance. The same principle applies to emotional resilience. You wouldn't expect to meditate for an hour on your first attempt, but sitting quietly for 60 seconds after your morning coffee. That's achievable. Over time, those seconds stretch into minutes, and the practice spills into everyday moments, pausing before reacting to a provocation, noticing your breath during a stressful meeting. Small steps aren't just about building skills, they're about rewiring your relationship with challenge itself. When progress feels accessible, you stop fearing the process. Here's your challenge: pick one micro-habit to anchor your month. Not a lofty goal, but something so simple it feels almost silly. Drink 1 glass of water upon waking. Write 1 sentence in a gratitude journal before bed. Stand up and stretch every time you finish a work call. The key is pairing it with an existing habit known as habit stacking to bypass decision fatigue. Tie your new action to something you already do without thought, like flossing after brushing your teeth or taking deep breaths at every red light. Zeno's lentils weren't about soup, they were about embracing discomfort in digestible portions. Your push-ups or sentences or sips of water aren't about the action itself, but about proving to yourself that consistency is possible. Over time, these tiny victories build something far greater than the sum of their parts. Trust in your own discipline. After all, if you can show up for 5 minutes daily, what couldn't you eventually master? The grand architecture of Stoic resilience isn't built in sweeping declarations, but in the quiet accumulation of days when you chose to begin again. Epictetus watched a student throw down his writing tablet in frustration after struggling with a lesson. Instead of scolding him, the Stoic master picked it up and said, "Every skill requires patience with the not yet." That moment captures a radical shift in perspective. What if failure isn't an ending but a checkpoint? Thomas Edison embodied this when he reframed his 10,000 unsuccessful attempts at the light bulb not as failures, but as discoveries of 10,000 ways that won't work. That's the not yet mindset in action, a simple linguistic pivot that transforms stumbling blocks into stepping stones. Think of how differently we approach challenges when we swap definitive language for provisional phrasing. "I can't do this" becomes "I haven't mastered this yet." That tiny shift does something remarkable. It moves the obstacle from your permanent identity to your temporary process. A student who bombs a math test can either internalize "I'm bad at math" or adopt "I haven't learned this method yet." One interpretation paralyzes, the other propels. Neuroscience confirms this. When we label struggles as permanent, our brains actually reduce effort, but frame them as temporary. Dopamine kicks in, fueling persistence. History's greatest innovators were Stoic in their not-yet persistence. J.K. Rowling's 12 publisher rejections weren't proof her writing lacked value. They were signposts directing her to the right door. Michael Jordan getting cut from his high school basketball team didn't mean he lacked talent. It meant his skills were still ripening. Even nature follows this pattern. An apple tree doesn't consider its first season without fruit a failure. It's gathering resources for future harvest. The not-yet mindset isn't naive optimism, it's strategic patience. Here's how to apply this today. Identify one area where you've labeled yourself as bad or failed. Now rephrase it as a not-yet statement. "I'm terrible at public speaking" becomes "I haven't developed my unique speaking style yet." Feel the difference. The first shuts down growth, the second opens a path forward. Epictetus would remind us that the obstacle is the way, not because suffering is virtuous, but because every not yet contains seeds of future mastery if we're willing to cultivate them. Your challenge this week is to create a not yet inventory. List 3 current frustrations, maybe a stalled project, a strained relationship, or a fitness plateau. Beside each, write what this experience is teaching you for the next attempt. That presentation that flopped, it revealed where your audience needed more clarity. The meditation habit that fizzled, it showed you need a shorter duration to build consistency. Edison didn't just fail forward, he learned forward, treating each attempt as data collection. The brilliance of this mindset lies in its honesty. It doesn't deny difficulty, it recontextualizes it. When a toddler falls while learning to walk, we don't declare them a failure at walking. We understand development requires falls. Why do we hold ourselves to harsher standards? The Stoics recognized this universal truth. Growth isn't linear, and mastery demands permission to be temporarily unmasterful. Your current not yet might be the very thing that future you will credit as the turning point. So ask yourself tonight, what story of failure is actually just a chapter titled Not Yet? There's a profound difference between reacting to life and responding from principle, and it all comes down to where you've drawn your circles. While Stephen Covey's famous circle of concern and circle of influence focus on external actions, the Stoic version cuts deeper. It's not about controlling outcomes, but mastering the only territory that's truly yours, your judgments, values, and voluntary actions. Picture 3 concentric rings. The outermost holds everything in the universe, weather, other people's opinions, traffic, stock markets. The middle ring contains things you can influence but not control, team morale at work, your child's study habits, local politics. But the innermost circle, the size of a coin yet more powerful than empires, holds what's fully yours to command, your attention, your effort, your integrity. That's the Stoics' true sphere of sovereignty. Most of our suffering springs from misdrawn boundaries. We treat outer circle events like inner circle responsibilities, exhausting ourselves trying to fix things that were never ours to govern. Imagine a project manager agonizing over a client's unpredictable moods. She's poured energy into the wrong ring. The Stoic approach focuses relentlessly on her preparation, her clarity in communication, her calm professionalism when chaos hits. Those are her true domains. Epictetus put it bluntly. If you think you control what's actually beyond you, you'll be frustrated constantly. Here's how to map your circles today. Grab a blank sheet and sketch 3 rings. Start filling the outer circle with genuine uncontrollables, flight delays, aging parents' health, the economy. Move inward to the influence ring, your networking efforts, how you model values for your kids, community volunteer work. Finally, the control ring, your morning routine, your patience in arguments, your choice to learn or complain. The revelation comes when you realize how much energy you've been leaking outward. That coworker's negativity you've been ruminating over, outer circle. Your decision to set boundaries with them, inner circle. Now for the pivotal question, what have you misclassified? Many mistake caring about for controlling. You can care deeply about your partner's happiness while recognizing their emotional state isn't yours to dictate. Parents often misplace their child's academic success into the control circle. When it belongs in influence, you can create a supportive environment, but the effort and results are ultimately their domain. The correction isn't detachment, but clarity, redirecting effort from what you wish you controlled to what you actually can improve. History offers striking examples. When the Roman general Scipio Africanus prepared to battle Hannibal, he didn't waste energy on the weather or his enemy's tactics outer circles. He drilled his troops relentlessly, influence, and cultivated his own strategic creativity control. Marcus Aurelius faced plagues and wars by focusing not on stopping death, an illusion of control, but on governing his own compassion and wisdom amid suffering. Their power came from precision in knowing where their agency truly lived. Tonight, try this recalibration exercise. Reflect on a current stressor and ask, which circle does this truly belong to? That neighbor's loud parties might feel like your problem, but your control lies only in your response: soundproofing, polite requests, or adjusting your sleep routine. The company merger causing layoff anxiety, outer circle. Your proactive skill building and financial preparedness, inner circle. Each time you correctly categorize, you reclaim energy previously spent on resistance and redirect it to what's actionable. The paradox of this practice: the more you honor your true sphere of control, the more your influence expands. People begin trusting your calm in crises. Opportunities gravitate toward your focused energy. Like a tree strengthening its roots rather than straining toward sunlight, your growth comes from tending what's yours. Stoicism's promise isn't that life gets easier, it's that you stop wasting effort on rain dances and start building shelters. So tonight, as you draw those circles, notice where you've been expending effort like a sailor bailing the ocean. Then turn your bucket toward what's actually in your boat. Marcus Aurelius left us a mental maneuver that turns adversity into advantage with just 3 words: the obstacle is the way. At first glance, it sounds like empty optimism, but there's razor-sharp strategy hidden in that phrase. Picture a blacksmith hammering molten steel. What looks like destruction is actually shaping something stronger. That's the gratitude flip, not pretending hardship feels good, but training yourself to spot the hidden curriculum buried within it. When a layoff notice lands on your desk, the initial shock is real, but so is the invitation to finally launch that side hustle you've been brainstorming in the shower. When a relationship ends, the grief is valid, but so is the space it clears for self-discovery you'd otherwise postpone indefinitely. History's greatest comebacks are built on this principle. Take the story of Airbnb's founders rejected by investors. They turned their struggle to pay rent into a global hospitality revolution by renting out air mattresses in their apartment. The very obstacle, lack of funding, became the prototype for their solution. Or consider Beethoven composing his iconic symphonies as his hearing faded, proving that sometimes losing one sense sharpens others to genius levels. The gratitude flip doesn't erase pain, it interrogates it for hidden gifts. Here's how to practice this today. Grab pen and paper and write a thank you note to a past challenge. Not flowery or forced, but specific. Dear broken collarbone, you forced me to pause my athletic training and discover my love for painting during recovery. Those canvases now hang in local galleries. A dear toxic job, your misery pushed me to finally freelance. 3 years later, I earned double working half the hours. This exercise works because it moves you from passive victim to active alchemist, transmuting leaden experiences into golden insights. The magic lies in the details. Don't just thank failure generically. Highlight exact lessons. That layoff taught you to diversify income streams. That betrayal showed you how to set boundaries. That creative block led you to discover morning pages. Marcus didn't vaguely appreciate hardships, he mined them for precise virtues. In his journals, he thanks specific irritants. The gossipy colleague reminds me to guard my speech. The sleepless nights give quiet hours to write. Try this reframe next time you hit a wall. Ask not, why is this happening to me, but what is this preparing me for? The entrepreneur who loses a major client gains resilience that later saves her company during a recession. The student who fails an exam learns study methods that ace the bar. Even COVID lockdowns, while devastating, taught millions to cook, reconnect with family, or start businesses from kitchen tables. The obstacle isn't just something to overcome, it's the whetstone sharpening you for what's next. Tonight, pick one scar from your past, career, health, relationship, and reverse engineer its gifts. That burnout phase, it birthed your meditation habit. The financial mistake, it made you a budgeting wizard. Write that thank you note not as an exercise in positivity, but as an act of reclaiming power. Because when you start seeing stumbling blocks as training equipment, life stops happening to you and starts happening for you. The road to your best self isn't paved with ease. It's built with the bricks of every challenge you've learned to flip into fuel. Seneca once warned his student Lucilius about a surprising danger: too many books, not for lack of wisdom, but because the mind, like a stomach, can only digest so much at once. Fast forward 2,000 years, and we've replaced scrolls with infinite scrolling, turning our brains into overwhelmed librarians trying to catalog a hurricane of headlines, notifications, and viral clips. The modern Stoic challenge isn't accessing information, it's defending your attention from the very tools designed to hijack it. Imagine your mind as a clear mountain spring. Every tweet, news alert, and binge-worthy series is a handful of mud tossed into those waters. At first, the sediment settles, but keep adding dirt and soon you're drinking sludge. This isn't about rejecting technology, it's about reclaiming sovereignty over what enters your mental ecosystem. Take the news cycle. 5 minutes of morning headlines can spike cortisol levels higher than a car accident, leaving you anxious about crises you can't influence. The Stoic alternative: a week-long news fast, not ignorance but intentionality. For 7 days, notice how your mind changes when it's not marinating in breaking updates about events 3 time zones away. That colleague who obsessively checks financial markets, watch how their mood swings with the Dow Jones as if their soul were tied to a stock ticker. Information isn't neutral, it rewires your nervous system. Experiment with a media audit by asking one brutal question: what content leaves me feeling drained versus energized? That political podcast that sparks outrage, does it motivate civic action or just simmering resentment? The influencer whose perfect life triggers comparison is that scroll adding value or eroding self-worth? Like a nutritional label for the mind, assess your consumption not by entertainment value alone, but by its emotional aftermath. The ancient peripatetic philosophers walked while teaching to keep thinking fluid. Today, we're sitting targets for mental clutter. Consider the difference between consuming content and letting it consume you. Reading about war to stay informed is one thing. Doom-scrolling battle footage until your hands shake is another. Marcus Aurelius advised, ask of each thing, what is it in itself? Apply that to your screen time. That viral drama dissected by 10 YouTube analysts, in itself, it's pixels and sound waves that'll be irrelevant in a fortnight. The biography of a scientist who changed medicine. That's knowledge compounding across your lifetime. Quality over quantity was Seneca's rule for libraries. Curate your digital shelves with the same discernment. The test comes when you resist the itch to stay updated. Try skipping your usual news ritual tomorrow. Notice the phantom limb sensation, your fingers twitching for absent stimulation. That void isn't emptiness, it's space where original thought germinates. Historians note that many breakthroughs, from Darwin's theory of evolution to Rowling's Harry Potter, emerged during periods of reduced input. Your brain doesn't need more data, it needs stillness to connect the dots already swirling inside. Practical steps: start small. Designate sacred hours, perhaps mornings or late evenings, as screen-free sanctuaries. Replace the habit loop. When reaching for your phone, pause to observe your breath for 3 cycles instead. Unfollow accounts that trade in outrage, even if you agree with their politics. Stoicism cares less about ideological alignment than mental tranquility. And when you do engage, ask Epictetus' question: is this within my control? Global events, outer circle, your focus and emotional reserves, that's your inner citadel to guard. The ultimate metric isn't minutes spent offline, but the quality of attention left over for what matters. After a week of mindful consumption, you might rediscover forgotten shelves of unread books, half-finished projects, or simply the sound of your own undistracted thoughts. Seneca complained of those who lived with their books always in their hands yet never absorbed their wisdom. Today's equivalent: endless tabs open in both browsers and brains. True knowledge isn't hoarded, it's metabolized until it becomes part of your intellectual bloodstream. Start treating your media diet with the same respect as your dinner plate, because what you consume doesn't just inform you, it shapes who you're becoming. Napoleon's march into Russia began with unchecked confidence and ended with frozen corpses strewn across the snow. The same arrogance that built his empire destroyed it, a pattern repeating through history like a tragic refrain. From Icarus flying too close to the sun to Blockbuster dismissing Netflix as a passing fad, hubris has always been the silent saboteur of success. That's where Stoicism delivers its sharpest counterpunch, not in building empires, but in dismantling the ego that topples them. The ancient philosophers had a name for this fatal flaw: hubris, the delusion that we're exempt from the rules governing mere mortals. Consider the tale of George Eastman, founder of Kodak. His company invented the digital camera in 1975, then shelved it to protect film profits, a decision that ultimately bankrupted the century-old giant. Contrast this with Marcus Aurelius, who ruled the Roman Empire yet reminded himself daily, "You're just a little soul carrying a corpse." The difference wasn't competence, it was consciousness. One man saw himself as invincible, the other as transient. History doesn't punish failure, it punishes the refusal to acknowledge you can fail. Ryan Holiday's ego is the enemy unearths this truth through modern examples. From athletes sabotaging their careers with entitlement to CEOs ignoring market shifts to preserve their self-image. The common thread: ego mistakes temporary advantage for permanent superiority. Stoics disarm this trap through deliberate humility practices. Cato the Younger, despite his political power, wore plain clothing and walked barefoot in Rome's brutal winters. Not as performance, but as vaccination against the disease of self-importance. Here's your challenge: perform one meaningful act anonymously this week. No social media posts, no humble brags, not even a hint to the recipient. Maybe it's paying for a stranger's groceries and slipping away before thanks arrive. Perhaps it's anonymously mailing a rare book to a struggling student you'll never meet. The test comes when no one knows it was you. That's where ego loses its grip. Like a sculptor chiseling away excess stone, each anonymous act reveals the true shape of your character underneath the craving for credit, the twist. Anonymity isn't just about hiding goodness, it's about revealing truth. When you remove the audience, you discover which actions stem from genuine care versus the hunger for validation. A tech CEO who quietly mentors startup founders after hours cultivates wisdom. One who demands keynote speeches cultivates an image. Both might offer similar advice, but only one is building unshakable integrity. Tonight, reflect on this. What have you avoided doing because it wouldn't be seen? That DIY project you'd tackle if friends would notice. The book you'd write if guaranteed fame. Ego cages potential in gold-plated prisons where every effort must yield external rewards. Breaking free starts with creating something only you will ever know mattered. A sketchbook never shown, a garden path visible from no window but your own. That's the Stoic secret. True mastery flourishes in the soil of quiet effort, far from the noisy marketplace of applause. History remembers differently than we expect. The Roman emperors who commissioned towering statues now lie forgotten, while Marcus Aurelius' private journal never intended for publication guides millions centuries later. Your legacy won't be measured by what you displayed, but by what you planted when no one was watching. So ask yourself tonight, what seeds will you bury in the dark, trusting they'll grow without witnesses? Seneca called sleep death's rehearsal, not to frighten us, but to reframe rest as sacred preparation for living well. The Stoics didn't collapse exhausted into bed after scrolling. They treated the transition to sleep as a deliberate ritual, a bridge between daily chaos and the quiet clarity of night. Picture two versions of your evening. One where you crash after binge watching, your mind buzzing with plot twists and notifications, versus another where you ease into rest like a ship lowering its sails methodically, intentionally. That's the difference between merely sleeping and truly restoring. Ancient wind-down rituals were disarmingly simple yet profound. Marcus Aurelius would review his day's actions by candlelight, asking not just what did I do, but how did I align with my principles? Seneca wrote letters to Lucilius by oil lamp, their flickering light a natural cue for melatonin. No sleep trackers, no blue light, just rhythms synced to nature's clock. Modern science confirms what these philosophers intuited. The hour before sleep shapes the quality of your rest and the tenor of tomorrow. Cortisol spikes from late-night emails can linger until noon, while the glow of screens tricks your brain into believing it's perpetual afternoon. Your challenge begins tonight with a 4-part Stoic sleep reset. First, declare a sunset hour, 60 minutes where screens go dark, literally. Not just on devices, but covering clocks and any LED glare. Replace them with indirect lighting or candles, letting shadows signal to your primal brain that day is done. Second, borrow Epictetus' Evening Audit. Jot down 3 actions today that reflected your values and 1 where you strayed. Not to judge, but to acknowledge growth like a gardener noting which seeds sprouted. Third, practice gratitude's gravity. Recall 3 small gifts the day offered. The warmth of your mug, a stranger's smile, the way sunset painted your walls gold. This isn't positivity, it's rebalancing your attention from what drained you to what sustained you. The final piece is perhaps the most countercultural. Lie still before sleep claims you. Not to chase oblivion, but to savor the threshold. Seneca described this liminal space as where the soul reviews itself. In that quiet, ask one question borrowed from Musonius Rufus: what will I surrender to tomorrow? Not tasks or goals, but burdens, the resentment you're ready to release, the perfectionism you'll trade for effort. Imagine placing those weights in a boat and pushing it into dark waters, watching them drift beyond your grasp. Practicality meets philosophy in the details. Try swapping your phone charger for a physical book across the room, making late-night scrolling a deliberate act rather than a reflex. Invest in blackout curtains not as luxury, but as a modern approximation of the caves Stoics praised for their perfect darkness. Even your pillow becomes symbolic. Fluffing it could be a mindfulness cue, a tactile reminder that you're preparing not just for rest, but for the clarity tomorrow demands. The proof emerges in dawn's first moments. When you wake from Stoic sleep, there's no groggy fumbling for alarms or notifications. Instead, you inherit the quiet focus Marcus described upon rising. You were made to be awake. Your mornings cease being reactive scrambles and become intentional launches, because the bridge between nights and days was built with purpose, not collapsed into chaos. That's the hidden gift of this ritual. It doesn't just improve sleep, it transforms how you meet whatever awaits when your eyes open. Marcus Aurelius stared into the heart of a paradox that still trips us up today: the human tendency to view life in strict either/or terms. We tell ourselves we must be either confident or afraid, either successful or failing, either happy or miserable. But in his private writings, the emperor-philosopher modeled a subtler truth. Wisdom often lies in the hand. He wrote, "You can be both tired and resolute, both grieving and grateful, both uncertain and moving forward." This is the both/and perspective, not splitting reality into neat categories, but holding space for life's inherent complexity. Imagine standing backstage before a major presentation. Your heart races, palms sweat. Classic fear. The outdated script says you must calm down to appear confident. But what if you could say instead, "My body is buzzing with adrenaline and my mind is focused. I'm nervous and ready." That slight shift changes everything. The energy remains, but its meaning transforms from weakness to fuel. History's most courageous figures didn't eliminate fear, they walked alongside it. Rosa Parks described her historic bus protest with stunning simplicity. "I was tired and determined. Not tired but determined, both truths coexisting." The real magic of this practice emerges when applied to identity. How many of us have thought, if I'm not excelling, I'm failing, or if I show vulnerability, I'll seem weak? Binary thinking creates false prisons where we deny whole parts of ourselves. A recovering alcoholic at their first sober party might think, "I'm either the life of the party or a social failure." The Stoic reframe. "I'm awkward in this new experience and proud of my sobriety." One doesn't cancel the other, they inform each other, that parent feeling, exhausted yet deeply loving. The entrepreneur balancing doubt with commitment. These aren't contradictions, they're the full spectrum of being human. Try this today. Identify one area where you've been trapped in either slash or logic. Maybe it's my job must be either deeply meaningful or financially rewarding. Why not pursue both gradually? Perhaps I must be the perfect parent or a total failure. What if you're attentively imperfect? Write down the binary thought, then disrupt it with "and." My house is cluttered and I'm making progress. My relationship has challenges and deep love. Notice how and creates breathing room where or demanded impossible purity. The Stoics didn't invent this wisdom, they observed it in nature. A tree isn't either strong or flexible, its strength comes from knowing when to bend. Water isn't either powerful or yielding, it carves canyons through persistence, not force. Your emotions and experiences are no different. Grief doesn't erase joy, it often reveals its depth. Fear doesn't negate courage, it makes courage meaningful. Marcus knew this when he ruled Rome during plague and war, writing, "The art of living is more like wrestling than dancing, not avoiding the struggle but finding your footing within it." Tonight, conduct a both slash and audit. Where have you been judging yourself harshly for not fitting narrow categories? That project at work, must it be either flawless or worthless, or could it be ambitious and a learning process? That fitness journey, is it really all or nothing, or is it challenging and worthwhile? Life's richest moments rarely fit binaries, they live in the tension between, where you're neither purely one thing nor its opposite, but vibrantly, messily human. The goal isn't to resolve every paradox, but to stop treating them like problems to solve rather than truths to embrace. After all, even the Stoics who prized rationality knew this. Wisdom isn't about having all the answers, it's about holding the questions with open hands. Epictetus threw open the doors of his philosophy school to all, but not all stayed. His blunt wisdom cut through pretenses. You become like those whose company you keep. 2 millennia later, neuroscience confirms his insight. Our brains literally sync with frequent companions through mirror neurons, adopting their speech patterns, emotional responses, even values. That coworker who always complains about management, you'll catch yourself mimicking their cynicism. The friend who dissects every minor slight, suddenly you're analyzing texts for hidden jabs. Toxic company isn't just unpleasant, it's contagious at a cellular level. The Stoic solution isn't mass friend dumping, but strategic filtration. Start by mapping your inner circle on 2 axes, virtue and energy. Vertically, assess how each relationship influences your character. Does this person exemplify wisdom, courage, temperance, justice? Horizontally, gauge their emotional resonance. Do you feel drained or energized after time together? Ancient Stoics called this the character audit, not judging others harshly, but recognizing their gravitational pull on your soul. Picture a farmer evaluating crops. Some relationships bear fruit, others choke roots. Try this experiment. Host a complaint-free gathering. Set one ground rule: no venting about bosses, weather, or traffic. Instead, conversations must explore solutions, curiosities, or gratitude. The magic happens in the silence following this announcement. Watch who leans in with creative alternatives and who squirms, addicted to grievance. One entrepreneur discovered her usual lunch crew couldn't last 20 minutes without griping, so she started inviting the office librarian whose passion for rare books sparked fascinating dialogues. Within months, her creativity flourished not from changing herself, but her influences. Upgrade your audit with 3 Stoic questions for every relationship. First, would I admire this person's values if they held power over me? Marcus Aurelius scrutinized even his closest advisors this way. Second, do our interactions leave me more or less capable of facing life's challenges? Epictetus warned against friendships that soften resolve like warm baths. Third, and most revealing, if this person were the only influence in my life, who would I become? Not whether they're good people, but whether they pull you toward your highest self. History's luminaries applied ruthless filters. Benjamin Franklin formed his Junto Club, where members had to debate ideas rather than gossip. Michelangelo deliberately avoided artists who copied rather than innovated. These weren't elitist snubs, they were protective measures for their craft. Your social ecosystem works the same way. That friend who always nudges you toward just one more drink isn't evil, they're just not part of your wisdom council. The relative who mocks your ambitions doesn't need confrontation, just reduced access to your dreams. The final test is subtle but telling. Track your vocabulary after time together. Do you pick up their pessimistic phrases or adopt their constructive language? Stoics believed speech reveals soul pollution. When Seneca noticed himself gossiping after certain encounters, he didn't blame the others, he adjusted his exposure. Modern research shows it takes just 15 minutes of contact to absorb someone's emotional state. That's why Navy SEALs screen not just for individual toughness, but for teammates who elevate group resilience under fire. Your challenge starts with one intentional connection this week. Reach out to someone who embodies qualities you're cultivating, perhaps the colleague who handles crises calmly or the neighbor whose generosity seems effortless. Observe how their rhythm affects yours. Like pruning a garden for optimal growth, social filtration isn't about loss, it's about creating space for what nourishes your highest potential. As Epictetus reminded his students, you weren't born to be weighed down by pettiness. Surround yourself with those who remind you of your wings. Seneca watched storms batter the shores near his villa and saw more than destruction. He saw a perfect metaphor for human emotions. The waves never apologize for their fury, he wrote, nor do they demand the shore alter its nature. That's the physics of emotion. Feelings aren't commands to obey or faults to fix, but natural phenomena to observe like weather patterns. Imagine standing knee-deep in the surf. When a wave hits, you don't scream at the ocean or blame yourself for its arrival. You note its force, adjust your stance, and trust it will recede. Your anger, anxiety, or envy deserve the same detached observation. They're not flaws in your circuitry, they're tides in your physiology. Modern neuroscience validates this ancient insight. When fMRI scanners map the brain during emotional spikes, they reveal something surprising. The sensations we call fear or joy are simply electrochemical surges following predictable pathways, much like waves obeying lunar pull. A panic attack isn't your soul malfunctioning. It's your amygdala flooding with cortisol like a storm drain overflowing in rain. The Stoic breakthrough was recognizing you needn't stop the waves to keep from drowning, just learn to float. Here's how to practice emotional meteorology today. When frustration flares during a traffic jam, pause and label it aloud. This is frustration, with the clinical detachment of a scientist noting barometric pressure. That tiny gap between feeling and identification changes everything. Brain scans show simply naming an emotion reduces its intensity by up to 50%, as if the act of observation drains its power. Epictetus trained his students this way. Say to every harsh impression, you are just an impression, not the thing you pretend to be. Consider two colleagues receiving critical feedback. One internalizes it as personal failure, spiraling into shame. The other observes, defensiveness is present, then evaluates the critique objectively. Both feel the initial sting biology guarantees that, but the latter retains agency by refusing to conflate sensation with truth. Like a sailor who knows rogue waves don't define the sea, they recognize emotions as temporary states, not identity markers. Try this experiment tonight. Recall a recent emotional surge, maybe road rage or jealousy over a friend's success. Replay it in slow motion, pinpointing the exact moment the wave crested. Did your chest tighten? Did your vision narrow? Now imagine holding that feeling at arm's length like a curious artifact. Interesting, this is what resentment feels like in my body. That slight shift from "I am angry" to "anger is passing through me" is the difference between being the storm and the watcher on shore. The genius of Seneca's metaphor lies in its neutrality. Oceans aren't good when calm or bad during hurricanes, they simply are. Your emotions work the same way. A mother's anxiety over her child's fever isn't weakness, it's evolutionary wiring meant to spur action. The artist's pre-show nerves aren't flaws, they're energy waiting to be channeled. Even grief, the heaviest of waves, carries purpose. It carves canyons of compassion that joy alone could never sculpt. Your challenge starts now. For one day, become an emotion ecologist. Carry a notepad and log each feeling like a naturalist documenting species. 10:15 a.m. Impatience while waiting for coffee. Physical signs, foot tapping, sighing. No judgment, no analysis, just tracking. You'll discover something revolutionary. Emotions rise and fall regardless of your permission. Naming them doesn't amplify their power, it reveals their transience. Like clouds passing over a mountain, they may temporarily obscure your view, but they can't alter your solid ground. Marcus Aurelius left us the ultimate question for weathering emotional squalls. What is this to me? Not dismissing the feeling, but interrogating its relevance. That insult from a stranger, a wave breaking far downshore, the regret over a missed opportunity, ripples from a pebble tossed long ago. By studying your emotions as one might study the sea, with respect but not submission, you reclaim the shore of your sanity, knowing no storm, however fierce, can last forever. Cato the Younger stood before Rome's Senate, his jaw set like iron, as corrupt politicians tried to buy his vote with promises of wealth and power. His response wasn't negotiation or compromise, it was a single syllable that echoed through history: no. No explanation, no apology, no wavering. That moment crystallizes a Stoic secret. Modern society has forgotten the power of refusal isn't rudeness, it's the bedrock of integrity. The world will always demand your time, your attention, your principles in exchange for approval, but every yes to what violates your values is a theft from what truly matters. Think about the last time you said yes when every fiber of you screamed no. That extra project that burned you out, the social event that drained you. The small moral compromise that kept you awake at night. We frame these as necessities, but the Stoics saw the truth. They're auctions where you bid pieces of your soul. Seneca wrote, "If you greet every external demand as though it were your own, you'll soon resemble a coat-rack useful to others but hollow inside." Boundary setting isn't selfishness, it's stewardship of the only life you're guaranteed. Here's where philosophy meets practice. Start small but deliberate. Decline one non-essential request this week with the grace of a philosopher, not with excuses that invite negotiation. "I'm so busy." But with principled clarity, "That doesn't align with my current priorities." Picture a colleague asking you to take on their workload last minute. Most people cave, fearing awkwardness. The Stoic alternative: "I understand this is urgent for you. Unfortunately, I've committed my bandwidth elsewhere." No hostility, no guilt, just an unshakable recognition that your time deserves the same respect you give others. History's most principled figures wielded no, like a sculptor's chisel, removing everything non-essential to reveal their masterpiece. Rosa Parks' refusal to move wasn't just about a bus seat, it was a boundary against systemic indignity. Steve Jobs eliminated dozens of Apple projects with "This isn't who we are," focusing genius rather than diluting it. Their power came not from how much they took on, but from what they consistently turned down. Try this role play today. Rehearse saying no to 3 common invasions: the pushy sales call, the guilt-tripping relative, the unnecessary meeting. Script your responses like an actor preparing lines. "I appreciate the offer, but I don't invest in cold pitches. I won't be able to attend, but I hope you have a wonderful event." Let's circle back when we have clear objectives. Notice how rehearsing steels your resolve when real pressure hits. Like Cotto facing down bribe givers, preparation makes refusal instinctive rather than agonizing. The deeper challenge isn't linguistic, it's psychological. We fear no because we overestimate its cost. What if they're offended? What if I miss out? The Stoics confront this with a brutal question. What's the price of your yes? That extra shift means less time with aging parents. That moral compromise erodes self-respect. Every agreement has invisible fine print. Your life becomes the collateral. Marcus Aurelius cautioned, when you're tempted by external demands, ask, what part of myself must I sacrifice to comply? Your weekly experiment starts now. Identify one no you've been avoiding. Maybe it's quitting a toxic group chat that drains your focus. Perhaps it's refusing to engage with a manipulative family member's drama. Not with aggression, but with the quiet finality of a Roman senator voting his conscience. Record the aftermath. Did the world end, or did you reclaim space for what nourishes you? That reclaimed energy might flow into morning workouts, creative projects, or simply the stillness modern life robs us of. Cotto's greatest legacy wasn't his political victories, it was his unwavering no to corruption that inspired generations. In a culture that glorifies busyness as status and people-pleasing as virtue, your refusals become revolutionary acts. They carve out room for your highest priorities to flourish. Because every unnecessary yes you eliminate isn't loss, it's the oxygen allowing your true, hell yes commitments to catch fire. Epictetus left us a simple but devastating question: what progress have I made today? Not in wealth or followers, but in the only currency that truly lasts: character. The character checklist is your answer to that challenge, a daily ritual that transforms abstract virtues into measurable actions. Picture a philosopher's ledger where courage isn't just an idea, but concrete moments: speaking up in a meeting when silence was safer, or resisting the urge to gossip when temptation whispered. Temperance shows up as the extra drink you declined or the unnecessary purchase you walked past. This isn't about perfection, it's about progression, one deliberate choice at a time. Start with 3 core virtues each morning, perhaps courage, temperance, and wisdom. Write them at the top of a blank page like chapter headings waiting for stories. Throughout the day, collect evidence like a detective building a case for your better self. That difficult conversation you initiated instead of avoiding. That's courage in action, the 30 minutes you reclaimed from scrolling to read philosophy. There's wisdom taking root. The Stoic twist comes at day's end. Grade yourself not on outcomes, but on effort. Did you lean into discomfort or shrink from it? Did your choices align with your aspirations or your appetites? The weekly review is where insight crystallizes. Lay out 7 days of checklists and look for patterns like a strategist studying battle maps. Maybe you'll notice courage falters most when you're tired, a clue to prioritize rest before high-stakes moments. Perhaps temperance wobbles in social settings, revealing hidden peer pressure you hadn't named. Epictetus warned, no man is free who is not master of himself. These reviews expose where you're still enslaved to old habits and where liberation is within reach. Try this tonight. Assign each virtue a color: courage red, temperance blue, wisdom green. Mark your calendar with colored dots reflecting the day's strongest and weakest traits. Over weeks, a vivid mosaic emerges. One executive discovered her red dots clustered on presentation days, while blue dominated during travel temptation's favorite hunting ground. The colors don't judge, they illuminate, turning self-awareness into visible art. The real magic happens when you pinpoint which virtue needs work, not with generic resolutions like "be braver," but with tactical adjustments. If courage lags, start small. Voice one unpopular opinion in a team chat. Temperance shaky, designate Wednesdays as no complaint days, where you transform grievances into solution finding. Wisdom lacking, institute a 5-minute pause before all decisions, from lunch orders to contract signings. Like a blacksmith tempering steel, each conscious act strengthens your moral metal. Marcus Aurelius modeled this in his journals, confessing shortcomings with clinical honesty. Today I lost patience with Lucius, not his tardiness, but my expectation of promptness caused my irritation. Notice the precision. He didn't flog himself for imperfection. He dissected the mechanics of failure to engineer future success. Your checklist becomes that same forensic tool, separating what happened from how you chose to meet it. Here's the challenge: commit to 14 days of virtue tracking, not as an exercise in self-criticism, but as a treasure hunt for growth. Each evening, ask Epictetus' question with fresh rigor: what progress did I make today? Some days the answer will be a proud list, others a single hard 1 inch. Both count, because the goal isn't flawless performance, it's unwavering attention to the daily sculpting of your character. And attention, as the Stoics knew, is the chisel that shapes destiny. Seneca watched his students furrow their brows over life's weightiest questions and offered an unexpected prescription: laughter. Not as distraction, but as wisdom in disguise. While most picture Stoics as stone-faced ascetics, the truth is far richer. The greatest philosophers wielded humor like a surgeon's scalpel, cutting through pretension without drawing blood. When a critic mocked Zeno's thin legs, the Stoic founder didn't bristle. He hiked his tunic higher, deadpanning, "Thanks for pointing that out. I'd hate for such tragedy to go unnoticed." This wasn't just quick wit, it was tactical humility, disarming hostility before it could take root. Modern psychology confirms what Seneca observed: laughter literally rewires tension. That moment when your boss nitpicks your report and you joke, "Well, at least my font choice was flawless," does something remarkable. It signals confidence without confrontation, turning potential conflict into shared humanity. The ancient Stoics mastered this art. When Epicureans ridiculed Stoic logic as word salads, clean shot back, "Then pass the dressing, I'll prove it's nutritious." Beneath the banter lay serious intent, demonstrating that philosophy shouldn't take itself so seriously it forgets to be relatable. Here's where modern resilience training meets ancient insight. Neuroscientists find that during genuine laughter, cortisol plummets while endorphins surge, nature's reset button for emotional equilibrium. That colleague who diffuses tension with a well-timed meme isn't being unprofessional. They're instinctively practicing what Seneca called the pause that refreshes the soul. Even Marcus Aurelius, despite the burdens of empire, wrote private reminders to lighten the stern brow, knowing that leaders who laugh invite loyalty no mandate can compel. Today's challenge flips frustration into fodder for growth. When stuck in traffic, instead of white-knuckling the wheel, imagine Seneca whispering, "Ah, the universe has gifted you an audiobook interlude." When your Wi-Fi crashes mid-meeting, channel Epictetus. "Excellent, now we'll remember who can think on their feet." The goal isn't to trivialize hardship, but to reframe it as life's improv comedy, unscripted, unpredictable, but rich with material for those willing to notice. History's wisest jesters knew the limits of levity. Cato the Younger tempered his legendary seriousness with wine-soaked poetry readings. Benjamin Franklin published self-roasting essays under pseudonyms, mocking his own follies before critics could. Their humor wasn't escape, it was perspective in disguise, a reminder that even virtue shouldn't stiffen into self-righteousness. Tonight, try this. Replay one annoyance from your day and script 3 humorous captions as if it were a comic strip. The Printer Jam isn't a crisis, it's an avant-garde performance art piece titled Office Rebellion. Your burnt toast becomes carbon cuisine, a cautionary tale. With each rewrite, you're not denying frustration, you're expanding your emotional range beyond it. That's the Stoic secret. Laughter doesn't weaken resolve. It makes resilience sustainable by proving no storm lasts forever, especially when you learn to dance in the rain. Marcus Aurelius whispered a haunting reminder to himself each dawn: you could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. This isn't morbid fixation, it's the ultimate prioritization tool. Picture yourself decades from now, frail beneath hospital sheets, replaying your life like a final film. What scenes would make you smile? Which omissions would claw at your ribs with regret? That's the Deathbed Test, not some abstract exercise, but a merciless spotlight on how you're spending your irreplaceable hours. The modern world feeds us endless distractions, notifications masquerading as emergencies, trivial debates framed as cosmic battles, while the Stoics offer an antidote. Live each day as if it's being evaluated by your dying self. Consider 2 versions of your last decade. One spent chasing promotions you didn't want for stuff you didn't need, skipping your child's recitals for meetings forgotten by next quarter. The other rich with handwritten letters preserved in loved ones' drawers, quiet walks where you actually noticed the seasons, risks taken for work that set your soul alight. The difference isn't time, it's attention. When researchers interview hospice patients about their deepest regrets, predictable patterns emerge. I wish I'd had the courage to live authentically tops the list, followed by I regret working so hard. Not a single person laments not binge-watching more shows or scrolling longer. Here's how to run the test today. Grab a notebook and complete this sentence. If I knew I had 12 months left, I'd immediately stop. The blank might hold toxic relationships, soul-crushing routines, or even your own self-doubt. Now ask the inverse. I'd finally start. That's your North Star hidden beneath layers of someday thinking. The Stoic twist: you don't need a terminal diagnosis to act, just the courage to pretend you do. When Seneca imagined his own deathbed in letters to Lucilius, he didn't despair, he used it to declutter his days. Why keep clothes for a journey you refuse to take? Modern life conspires against this clarity. We postpone joy for hypothetical futures. I'll travel after retirement. I'll reconcile when they apologize first. But the Romans knew time's cruel joke. It's never later that we run out of hours. It's always today in disguise. When a student asked Epictetus how to live well, he didn't offer complex theories. He pointed to a water clock and said, "See how the drops fall." That's your life leaving. Act accordingly. Try this tonight. Write your ideal eulogy in 3 sentences. Not the sanitized version for public consumption, but the raw truth you'd want whispered over your ashes. Then audit yesterday. Did your actions move you closer to that epitaph or further away? A CEO client of mine kept failing this test until he taped a photo of his grandfather's empty chair to his monitor. Now every decision gets weighed against the question, will this matter when my chair's empty? The deathbed lens reveals life's actual currency, not accumulated achievements, but depth of connection and integrity of effort. That argument you're nursing over who was right. At life's end, only the reconciliation will matter. The passion project collecting dust, your future self watches with sorrow as you prioritize others' expectations over your own joy. Marcus left us the remedy. Waste no more time arguing what a good person should be. Be one. not tomorrow, not when conditions are perfect now, while your heart still beats and choices remain. The clock's running. What's your next move proving about how fully you're willing to live? Epictetus sat in his sparse Athenian room. No velvet cushions, no gold trinkets, just a simple wooden stool and a clay cup. When a wealthy merchant scoffed at his lack of possessions, the philosopher smiled and said, "I see you've brought all you own while I carry all I need." That moment captures the heart of Stoic minimalism, not deprivation, but liberation from the weight of endless wanting. Your closet bursting with unworn clothes, your phone cluttered with unused apps, even your calendar choked with trivial obligations. These aren't just organizational challenges, they're psychological anchors dragging you away from clarity. Minimalism in the Stoic sense isn't about counting possessions, it's about auditing what truly serves your purpose. Start where the Stoics did with desire itself. Before decluttering a single drawer, ask Epictetus' razor-sharp question. Does this align with my freedom or my fantasy? That gym equipment gathering dust isn't just taking up space, it's whispering daily reminders of abandoned intentions. The stack of unread self-help books, a monument to the person you keep promising to become rather than the one you are. Real minimalism begins in the mind, recognizing how we use objects as band-aids for unmet aspirations. When Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Very little is needed to make a happy life," he wasn't praising austerity, he was highlighting how excess drowns out the essential. Here's how to translate philosophy into action: the 10-item challenge. Pick one domain, your wardrobe, your kitchen gadgets, even your digital files. Handle each item and apply the Stoic triage test. First, have I used this in the past year? Second, does its presence actively uplift or empower me? Third, and most revealing, if I lost this tomorrow, would I reclaim it or feel relieved? That sweater you keep, just in case, for hypothetical dinner parties. The files from a job you left 5 years ago. They're not just clutter, they're security blankets for a version of life you're not actually living. History's most profound minimalists weren't monks, they were warriors. Spartan soldiers carried just a cloak, a shield, and a spear because excess weight slowed them in battle. Your modern battle's distraction, decision fatigue, anxiety are no different. Every unnecessary item in your space is a decision waiting to be made, a maintenance demand silently draining focus. When the Roman general Scipio Africanus burned his fleet upon reaching Carthage, ensuring his troops couldn't retreat, he wasn't being reckless, he was practicing strategic minimalism. Your version: delete those half-finished projects haunting your hard drive. Donate the hobby supplies for passions you've outgrown. Burn the mental bridges to past versions of yourself so you can march forward unencumbered. The magic happens in the aftermath. After donating those 10 items, notice what doesn't happen. The world doesn't end. Friends don't judge, and strangely, you don't even miss them. What does emerge is space: physical, mental, and temporal. That cleared drawer becomes room for morning journaling. The freed-up phone storage makes space for a meditation app. Even more profound, the psychological shift when you realize how little you actually require to thrive. Like Epictetus' clay cup that could shatter without disturbing his peace, your attachments loosen. You start evaluating new purchases with Stoic rigor. Will this expand my freedom or become its jailer? Tonight, conduct a reverse inventory. Instead of listing what you own, list what owns you. The subscriptions auto-deducting from your account, the someday projects monopolizing closet space, even the grudges occupying mental real estate. Then apply Seneca's timeless test. If you lost all this tomorrow, would you be diminished or distilled? Minimalism isn't about empty shelves, it's about creating vacancy for life's true luxuries. Uninterrupted thought, unrushed conversations, and the uncluttered stillness where wisdom takes root. Your possessions should serve like a well-trained staff, present when needed, invisible when not. the fewer things demanding your attention, the more fully you can attend to what actually matters. Marcus Aurelius left us a masterclass in self-guidance. His private journals weren't just reflections, but conversations with his highest self. Imagine standing at a crossroads in your own life. Maybe it's a career leap that terrifies you, or a relationship teetering between repair and release. Now picture this. Instead of spiraling in indecision, you step outside yourself and ask, what would the wisest version of me advise? That's the third-person strategy, a psychological lever that shifts you from confusion to clarity by borrowing the objectivity of your own future wisdom. Consider how differently we counsel others versus ourselves. A friend hesitating over leaving a toxic job, you'd list their strengths and remind them peace of mind outweighs any paycheck. But faced with the same choice, your inner dialogue might drown in, what if I fail? And, can I even survive? The Stoic workaround, become your own sage advisor. When Marcus wrote, waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one, he was literally coaching himself through the page. His journals are filled with these split-second therapy sessions. You're awake now. Then why not act like it? No platitudes, just crisp directives from his own conscience. Here's how to activate this today. Take a current struggle, say procrastinating on a passion project, and script a dialogue between present you and wise you. Present you whimpers, I'm scared it won't be perfect. Wise you counters with Epictetus' blade. Is your fear more about protecting your ego than serving the work? Present you hesitates, but what if no one cares? Wise you shrugs. Better to create and be ignored than to silence yourself preemptively. This isn't self-talk, it's self-intervention, separating your fleeting emotions from enduring principles. History's greatest minds used this tactic. Benjamin Franklin would literally picture his older, wiser self observing his choices. Eleanor Roosevelt confronted social anxiety by asking, what would a truly courageous woman do? Modern psychology validates this. Studies show people who use third-person language, what should Alex do, make more rational decisions than those stuck in I statements. The slight linguistic distance dampens emotional noise, letting your prefrontal cortex override amygdala hijacks. Try this tonight. Write a letter from your 80-year-old self about your current dilemma. Not some vague, you'll be fine, but specifics. That job you're clinging to for security, let it go. Remember how your hands shook signing the resignation. That was the tremor of rebirth, not ruin. The magic lies in the details. Wise you knows which comforts are actually cages and which risks were always worth taking. Marcus left us the template. When you're reluctant to get up at dawn, think, I'm rising to do human work. Not guilt or grandiosity, just simple reminders of who you're capable of being. Your turn. What's one decision where you've been playing small? Now pull up a mental chair for the wisest, kindest version of yourself to weigh in. Their advice might surprise you, not because it's foreign, but because it's the truth you've been too rattled to hear. Viktor Frankl stared into the abyss of Auschwitz and emerged with an unshakable truth. Those who could answer why could endure almost any how. This wasn't just Holocaust survival wisdom, it was Stoic philosophy in its purest crucible. While prisoners collapsed under despair around him, Frankl noticed something revelatory. The ones who clung to purpose, whether seeing their child again or finishing a book, outlasted those fixated solely on escape. Their suffering didn't lessen, but its meaning transformed from torture to testimony. That's the Stoics' why, not some esoteric concept, but an existential lifeline woven into daily existence. When Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What stands in the way becomes the way," he wasn't offering empty consolation. He was revealing how purpose alchemizes adversity into fuel. Modern lives may lack concentration camps, but we drown in quieter desperations, joyless jobs, hollow scrolling, relationships reduced to transactional exchanges. The antidote isn't finding easier circumstances, but excavating the sacred why beneath your grind. Consider two nurses on the same grueling shift. One sees only sore feet and cranky patients. The other views each interaction as upholding Florence Nightingale's legacy of compassionate care. Identical tasks, radically different experiences, not because the work changed, but because the latter connected menial actions to monumental meaning. Your daily rituals hold the same potential. That commute isn't just traffic, it's protected time to prepare for being fully present with your family, the spreadsheet you dread. Not just cells and formulas, but the foundation for your team's success. Frankl called this tragic optimism, the ability to find significance in suffering by asking not, "What do I want from life?" but "What does life want from me?" In Stoic terms, your why is the compass that keeps you oriented when storms blow you off course. Try this today. Take 3 mundane tasks and reframe them as conscious acts of service. Folding laundry becomes nurturing order in your home's ecosystem. Answering emails transforms into honoring others' time. Even paying bills shifts from a chore to stewarding resources that enable your higher goals. The tasks don't change, your relationship to them does. Like a blacksmith tempering raw iron into resilient steel, purpose hardens ordinary moments into extraordinary resilience. History's most resilient figures shared this trait. Thomas Edison's 10,000 failed experiments weren't defeats, they were steps toward illuminating humanity. Marie Curie's radiation poisoning wasn't senseless, it was the price of advancing medical science. Their suffering gained meaning because it served something beyond themselves. Your struggles, from creative blocks to financial stress, are no different. That difficult client isn't just a headache, they're refining your patience. The rejected manuscript isn't proof of failure, but preparation for the right yes. Tonight, conduct a why excavation. Light a candle and ask, if my life were a novel, what would its central theme be? Not the plot twists or setbacks, but the enduring message you're here to embody. For Frankl, it was finding meaning through love and work. For Marcus Aurelius, ruling justly amid chaos. Yours might be raising compassionate children, innovating solutions, or simply bearing witness to beauty others overlook. When the candle burns low, distill it into one word: legacy, healing, freedom, and place it where tomorrow's weary eyes will find it, because when exhaustion whispers, quit, your why roars, persist. Not by denying hardship's reality, but by revealing its hidden curriculum. Every obstacle is life asking, how badly do you want what you say matters? The answer doesn't just determine your endurance, it shapes who you become in the struggle. Frankl survived the camps, you're surviving your own modern battles. The common thread, both journeys become bearable, even transformative, when walked with purpose as your guiding star. Seneca stood in his sun-drenched garden, pressing seeds into the earth with hands that had penned some of history's wisest letters. A tree that will shade generations, he mused, is planted by someone who knows they'll never sit beneath its branches. That's the Stoic's legacy, not monuments carved with your name, but quiet acts that ripple outward long after you're gone. Think of the Roman aqueducts still standing after 2,000 years. Their builders never tasted the water that flowed through them, yet their foresight quenches thirst centuries later. Your legacy work might not involve stone and mortar, but the same principle applies. Contribute to a world you won't inhabit. Mentorship is living mortar in this invisible architecture. Picture the physics teacher who stayed after class to nurture your curiosity. You can't measure how many discoveries their patience enabled downstream. Epictetus, once a slave, became a teacher whose words now fuel modern therapists and CEOs. His student Arion transcribed those lessons, ensuring they'd outlive both men. You don't need a lecture hall to pay this forward. That new employer you're coaching, the neighbor kid you're teaching to change a tire, even the honest review you leave for a struggling artist. These are the threads you weave into time's tapestry. Writing is another bridge to the future. Marcus Aurelius never intended his journals for publication, yet his private reflections became a lifeline for millions. Your words needn't be profound to endure the recipe book you compile for your grandchildren, the troubleshooting guide you draft at work, even the heartfelt letter tucked into a family Bible. When archaeologist Theodore Davis unearthed an ancient Egyptian tomb, he found a loaf of bread left as an offering, not gold or jewels, but sustenance. That's the Stoic's pen, leaving behind nourishment, not trophies. Legacy isn't about scale, it's about intentionality. A nurse who invents a better bedside manner, a mechanic who documents repair tricks for apprentices, a parent who records bedtime stories for future generations, all are planting trees whose shade they'll never enjoy. The test comes when you ask, what's one thing I can create that would still matter if I vanished tomorrow? Maybe it's funding a scholarship with your annual bonus or spending Saturdays restoring a community garden. It could be as simple as compiling life lessons into a Google Doc shared with your nieces. History remembers an odd truth: we often undervalue what endures. Shakespeare thought his sonnets would outshine his plays. Beethoven assumed his symphonies would fade. Yet here we are, centuries later, healed by their miscalculations. Your legacy might hide in plain sight the kindness that inspires a stranger to break a chain of resentment, the prototype that sparks someone else's breakthrough. Like Seneca's tree, the true measure lies in what grows after you've left the garden. Your task starts small but stretches far. Choose one project that only bears fruit for others. Teach a skill without expecting credit. Bury a time capsule of wisdom for your future self to rediscover, or simply live in a way that makes people ask, what was their secret? Legacy isn't a finale, it's the echo of your values in actions you'll never witness. The Stoics knew immortality wasn't about living forever, but about making forever better because you passed through. Socrates, the wisest man in Athens according to the oracle, made a shocking confession: I know that I know nothing. This wasn't false humility, but the foundation of all true learning, the beginner's mind. Fast forward to Cato the Younger, the iron-willed Stoic who ruled Rome's Senate, who was once caught reading Greek philosophy at age 80. When mocked for studying so late in life, he simply replied, "It's the earliest age I have left." Both men understood what modern neuroscience confirms: the brain thrives on novelty, not expertise, that tingling discomfort of being bad at something new. That's the feeling of neural pathways forging fresh connections, of your mind expanding its borders. Consider two musicians, one who's played the same setlist for decades, fingers moving by rote, and another who at 60 picks up the saxophone, enduring squeaks and missed notes with childlike fascination. Who's truly growing? The Stoics valued progress over perfection, seeing each new skill as a mirror reflecting our capacity for reinvention. When Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The obstacle is the way," he might well have added, especially when that obstacle is your own unfamiliarity. Here's where philosophy meets practice. Your challenge isn't to master a skill this month, but to purposefully suck at one. Maybe it's learning chess tactics that make your 14-year-old nephew smirk, or attempting watercolor landscapes that look more like Rorschach tests. The magic lies in resisting the urge to say, "I'm too old for this." Neurons don't care about birthdays, they respond to challenge at any age. Like Cato poring over foreign scrolls, the act of beginning itself becomes the victory. Try this reframing. Instead of measuring progress, track curiosity. That botched pottery class isn't a failure, it's fieldwork in humility, the coding tutorial that leaves you dizzy. A reminder that every expert was once baffled. History's great polymaths from Leonardo da Vinci to Benjamin Franklin shared one trait: they remained perpetual apprentices. Franklin taught himself swimming strokes from a book at 60, while Da Vinci's notebooks brim with sketches labeled "Learn this" well into his 50s. Tonight, conduct a beginner's audit. Where have you been pretending competence to avoid the sting of novice status, that colleague discussing machine learning? Instead of nodding along, ask, how would I start learning that? The barista creating latte art. Request a lesson in milk steaming. Vulnerability becomes fuel when you realize every master was once the fool willing to look foolish. Your beginner's area might be a language that twists your tongue, a dance style that defies your rhythm, or simply the courage to say, I don't know, teach me. The Stoic twist, embracing ignorance, isn't about diminishing yourself, it's about reclaiming the expansiveness children naturally possess. Watch a toddler stack blocks. Each collapse delights as much as success because the process itself fascinates. Somewhere between crayons and careers, we traded wonder for the armor of expertise. Cotto's final lesson lies in that dog-eared Greek text, not what it contained, but what his willingness to be seen studying it represented. True wisdom isn't knowing everything, it's remembering how much remains undiscovered and having the guts to explore it with hands unafraid to fumble. Every morning before his sandals touched the marble floors of his academy, Epictetus would recite a simple vow not to the gods, not to his students, but to his own conscience. Today, I will meet interference with adaptability, insults with indifference, and hardship with resilience. This wasn't grand philosophy, it was a warrior's pre-battle chant. The Stoics understood something modern neuroscience now confirms. Words shape neural pathways, and repetition forges identity. Your daily Stoic pledge isn't about lofty ideals, it's about wiring your brain for action, one deliberate phrase at a time. Think of it like a mental keel, the weighted centerline that keeps a ship upright in stormy seas. Without it, you're at the mercy of every emotional gust. Marcus Aurelius anchored himself with reminders like, waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one. Seneca began mornings by asking, what virtue will I test today? These weren't passive reflections, they were contracts signed with the self. Your pledge works the same way, a daily recommitment to who you're becoming, not just who you've been. Crafting your oath starts with excavation. Grab a notebook and answer 2 questions. What weakness consistently hijacks my peace, and what strength would neutralize it? If social media triggers comparison, your pledge might be, I'll measure my progress against my past self, never others' highlights. If procrastination plagues you, try, I'll dedicate the first hour to what matters most, not what shouts loudest. The key is specificity. Avoid vague virtues like be better. Instead, channel Epictetus' precision. I'll greet every obstacle as raw material for growth. History's most resilient figures used variations of this practice. Benjamin Franklin famously tracked 13 virtues daily, while the samurai recited Bushido codes before battle. Modern examples abound. The athlete who visualizes perfect form, the CEO who reviews core values before meetings. What unites them is ritualizing intent before chaos hits. Your pledge isn't just words, it's rehearsal for life's improvisation. Here's the challenge, write yours now, not in your head, but on paper or screen where it gains gravity. Keep it short enough to memorize, but potent enough to stir you. Then place it where morning you can't ignore it, taped to your bathroom mirror, saved as your phone's lock screen, even whispered aloud while coffee brews. The act of reciting matters as much as the content, like a blacksmith hammering steel. Each repetition tempers resolve. Epictetus warned, no great thing is created suddenly, any more than a bunch of grapes or a fig. Your pledge is the daily watering of that vine. Some days it'll feel like a lifeline, others a dull routine. But over weeks you'll notice something startling. The voice in your head starts echoing the oath before you consciously recall it. That's the alchemy, deliberate practice becoming instinct. Now step beyond the page, share your pledge in the comments, not for applause but for accountability. When words leave your private sphere, they gain teeth. And who knows, your "I'll respond, not react" might spark the exact reminder someone else needed today. That's the Stoic circle, each of us strengthening the next, link by link, vow by vow. Your turn. The pen or keyboard is waiting. After 46 battle-tested strategies, the essence of Stoicism crystallizes into 3 unshakable pillars: control over your judgments, resilience through adversity, and purpose that guides action. These aren't abstract ideas to debate over wine, they're muscles to strengthen daily. The Roman Stoics didn't scribble philosophy in ivory towers. They sharpened these principles in the grit of political upheaval, war, and personal tragedy. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire under siege while writing meditations by candlelight, proving that wisdom without application is like a sword kept sheathed during battle. Consider the carpenter's workshop. Raw timber becomes furniture not through admiration of tools, but through sawing, sanding, and joining. Your life shapes up the same way. Each strategy we've explored is a tool waiting for your hands. The dichotomy of control, that's your chisel for carving away unnecessary worry. Premeditatio Malorum, your hammer for forging mental toughness. Amor Fati. The plane smoothing rough edges into graceful acceptance, but tools unused gather dust while the workshop of your potential stands unfinished. Marcus left us with a razor-sharp imperative: waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one. Those 8 words slice through procrastination's throat. Right now, pick one strategy, just one, to wield before sunset. Maybe it's the 10-minute journal audit tonight, or the view from above when traffic boils your blood tomorrow. Not tomorrow, not when things calm down today, while your resolve is fresh. History's most resilient people weren't born unbreakable. They became so through repetitions too small to applaud but too consistent to ignore. Your journey doesn't end when this video does, it begins. Whether you're facing a career crossroads, personal loss, or simply the daily grind, these strategies are your armor and compass. Want more Stoic wisdom to fuel your progress? Join our community of modern practitioners, hit subscribe, and let's keep turning philosophy into action, one challenge at a time. The porch of Epictetus' ancient classroom stays open to all who choose to enter.